Welcome, everybody. I mean, it is a great pleasure to welcome you here in Warsaw at the seminar about digital union. I think that I have at least two reasons for being here. First of all, that I used to be a think tanker, and I remember those times fondly where my work was based on actually sitting down in calmness and preparing reports about different issues concerning European integration. At least I could plan my day back then. And then obviously as a member of the European Parliament, I was very much interested in digital affairs, working in the European Parliament on things such as data protection or digital single market. And then I served in the Polish government as a minister for digitization and administration for a year, and obviously that was the topic which was close to my heart. And now I'm here as in my capacity as a Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs. Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in its wisdom, has been trying to work with quite a few think tanks in order to boost our capacity to reflect on the most important issues on the European Union agenda. And Bruegel is one of those think tanks that we were working with most closely. And when it was founded 10 years ago, the Polish government decided to be a funding member, and we are cooperating, have been cooperating ever since, quite closely with Bruegel, who, as you know, does all kinds of analysis on economic issues. And since 2004, we had quite a lot of points on the European agenda which needed in-depth thinking, starting with economic crisis, then with things such as banking union, which obviously in its intricacy needs quite a lot of research, and then on to questions which are most topical now, such as digital agenda. We were cooperating quite closely, specifically throughout 2011, which was obviously the period when Poland held the presidency of the European Union. We then managed to organize quite a few important and interesting seminars in Warsaw on important issues. And quite a lot of top people, our top people were cooperating with Bruegel, starting with Balcerowicz, but also Hausner, Pietras, in working for the think tank and for the debate on most important European issues. And I think that the biggest contribution of Bruegel to our debate is the informal way in which those debates can be run, and the network structure, which obviously facilitates an open debate on most important issues. And workshops such as this provide an excellent opportunity for fruitful discussions on the issues which are important for all of us. And obviously today on the agenda is single digital market, the thing which really is important for all of us. Poland, for quite a few years, tried to be at the forefront and the avant-garde of the debate about digital single market. It is important for us because of many different reasons. I mean, first of all, obviously, after the economic crisis, we are all looking for a niche for development, for growth. And digital single market is one of those niches that can be used to exploit the potential which hasn't been exploited so far. And it would help Europe to emerge from the economic downturn in the recent years. But it also is important because it touches upon quite a number of important issues that have a relevance to our daily lives. I remember that when I started dealing with those issues 5 years ago, questions such as network neutrality or internet governance, or even questions connected to privacy, they were debated by a couple of experts. They were not very popular. They were seen as being very technical. Obviously, in Poland, we had first very important sign with the debate on ACTA, which turned out not to be very technical. It turned out to be very, very important to people, and it turned out that all of those questions, such as intellectual property rights, or as I've just said, the questions connected to governance of internet, are at the core of the debate about freedoms, about privacy, about where do we really want to go, and are intrinsically very difficult to resolve, because there always is this difficult balance that we have to try to strike between, on the one hand, privacy, on the other hand, security, on the one hand, our most fundamental rights, but on the other hand, possibilities for new business to develop and for the innovativeness of the European economy to be strengthened. And all of those debates, as I say, are at the core now of the public debate about Europe, about the future, and are specifically important in Poland. Our job here is to set the environment right for frank and interesting discussions. I think that there is no better partner than Bruegel to do it with, and I'm confident that today we will significantly contribute to that debate. I'm looking forward to interesting discussion throughout the panels. As always with ministers, I will have to run back to the ministry, but I will come back to listen to the closing sessions, because as I've told you, I mean, this is one of the issues, one of the topics that interests me personally. Thank you very much, and let's start the good work.
Hello and welcome. My name is Guntram Wolf and I'm the director of Bruegel, and it is a true pleasure and honor for me to be here today and co-organize this event on digital union, which we at Bruegel also think is a central subject for Europe's economy and so in consequence also for the Polish economy. We are very pleased today to have with us Minister Andrzej Halicki, and I apologize for my German pronunciation of your name, but I hope I got it more or less right. And he's the Minister of Administration and Digitalization of Poland, has a very distinguished career in public policy, in different advisory jobs, including as concerns, I noted, privatization. You worked as an advisor on privatization, which is also a very interesting subject, in fact, and remains interesting. So I think in the interest of time, let me again welcome you. I very much look forward to the keynote lecture, to two panels, and then to a concluding keynote lecture by Commissioner Günther Oettinger on also on the digital economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Guntram, and all the best to you, because I've heard you have 10th anniversary. So all the best to Bruegel, all the best to you. How soll Sie leben in German? In Polish, my name Andrzej Halicki, very similar to what you said, but I would like to emphasize that I came back to politics at the very beginning of transformation, at the very beginning of 90s. I was in Ministry of Privatization. It was the first attempt to achieve European level by our citizens, by our country. Now the next challenge, digitalization. So maybe there are some common things which are similar to that time, because I feel that it is really very important for us. So I would like to give you a warm welcome to Warsaw. I think it's not coincidence that months ago President Ansip was also here in Warsaw, and he presented publicly the first time the document which was adopted by European Commission, so digital single market strategy. And we've been talking about here in Warsaw. I think that it emphasized that Poland would like and really plays active role on that field. And what is important for us, it was not only Polish documents sent to Brussels. We sent it at the very beginning of March, after discussion in the region, adopted also by the countries from Visegrad group and the Baltic states. So it was more than one governmental document sent to Brussels. I hope it was also useful to have it in Brussels and to adopt a part of the document into the digital single market strategy. I'm very honored to be here today because I feel that this is a very important time we are facing. But to start this discussion, I would like to come back also to the previous time, the 90s. In 1997, as I remember, because I finished economy university in Warsaw, at this university I was responsible for the lesson given by Professor Robert Mundell. He was called a father of euro currency, as you know, awarded by Nobel Prize, I think, year before, 2 years before. And it was, by the way, transmitted live by internet to more than 30 universities in Poland, and more than 30,000 of students participated in this event. The biggest event ever. I think we had no similar during 90s, which was not very easy during that time. And what did he say during this conversation to students? He said, well, the estimation of the benefit of implementation of euro currency is obvious. It's counted in billions of euro. The political benefits also, the stability for sure, the risk lower. But I don't believe that you will have euro soon. He said, I didn't believe in this fast implementation. Why? Because you are too conservative. Let's think about German without mark in his pocket. Let's think about French people without franc and the others. So we even don't remember that you had mark before marks, French francs, and so on. So it was so fast process that even we cannot think how it could be done in such a very short way. So during that time, when he estimated, we had artificial EQ currency during that time, something like 400-500 of billions of savings because of lack of mergers, lack of risk of investment, lack of other costs of having separate currencies. The economic benefit was obvious. I would like to say and to emphasize that we have similar estimations concerning digital market. We can save a huge amount of money as the economy of Europe, as a common economy, and also in national level we can save a lot. So why we have problem with that? Why we have a national borders on a digital area? If we have no passports, it was our dream before when we've been in 80s in opposition, not to have even visa, but well, to have opportunity to go abroad. My son, he is 22 years old, he even doesn't know what passport means. No, he knows because he lost it. But this traveling is without any limitation. He would like to study everywhere, he can do it. What his expectation is to have access to all the things he wants, to buy a game, to phone without roaming, to have same access as French, British people, Germans doing at the same time. Because we are in common Europe. If we are in common Europe, we have to have a common digital market. That's obvious, but why we have not? That's a very important question, because working on digital single market strategy, we have to have an answers how to implement it. And if we are thinking about the benefits, the solutions, we have to have a citizen in the middle, citizen in the center, because the citizens' expectations have to be realized. European citizens want to have, as simple as it is, all the services which are available, technically available. So to sell like at home, to buy like at home, to roam like at home. And we have to do it as soon as possible. So I believe that this is the best way to go back on a fast growth path. So for European economy, it's very, very important to have a new impulse for growing, and also for us as citizens, it's very important to improve condition of life, to improve all the conditions of our being together in one common Europe. If we are in one common Europe, we are of course politically united. We are living in democratic free world. We can feel much safer than before, but we are still not united. So digital union is needed. There are several fields which are very important to be improved. Poland is for sure not the best to follow, because we have a lot of work to do. This year is the year when we will finish a very big work on infrastructure area. So the access to for consuming for the customers will be much easier, because we will finish for broadband internet, the backbone net, which is more than 40,000 kilometers long all over the Poland, and will be finished. We have to install e-administration services, because this is a part of the job. We have to give the infrastructure for self-governmental offices, because one of the biggest issues we have in mind, it's not to go every day to the office, but to do all things we want by internet, electronically. This is the expectation of younger generation. So better conditions, better infrastructure, but also another side of this business. We have to help our entrepreneurs, the companies. We have to support them. We have to have one tax regulation and not discrimination for IT sector, because I can say that the higher VAT tax is rather discrimination than help. So we have to think how to support IT sector in Europe. 20 years ago or 30 years ago, we've been leading continent on that. Now check the results. I've seen the Boston Consulting Group report last time. The top 20 companies of the world, they are from the branch, but no one from Europe. Only Asian and North American companies. No one from Europe. Are we not able to be there? For sure not. If you are talking about industry, of course there are some technical points how to solve it. But I think this is not the point we have to have in mind. the point is still the same. The citizen, the customer, the expectation of ordinary people. We can improve this economic impact, but we have same rules. So simplification or elimination of the barriers are needed. So same rules means harmonization and standardization. We have to have the same definitions, because when we will talk about personal data protection or authority rights, we'll have different definitions, different rules, different ideas how to solve. And the last, also very important field means security, means trust. We have to be also together in that case, because one hacker can create bigger chaos than regular army today. And it could be wherever. It doesn't mean anything. We are, as a one potential single market economy, have to be sure and to be protected. So we have to cooperate on the same standards with all the countries, with all the societies, to exchange the information of accidents, to have cooperation, very close cooperation of national certs, and of course the idea one nation, one country, one cert is also needed to be implemented. One institute at Crete Island doesn't solve the problems. So the cooperation on security field is not the last task, as I said, maybe the first one, because we have to think about even today, when the industry is not so solved as in Poland is. We have this challenge in mind, so that's the reason we are, as a Poland, we are very, very active. I would like to emphasize that also today, after the digital single strategy was presented, we would like to have governmental position on that. A Minister of Administration and Digitization has a special advisory body we are calling the Council for Digitization. So we would like also have open discussion with all non-governmental organizations on that field. Of course, we have this discussion also internal the government between the ministries. I hope that in 1-2 months' time we'll have official position on that strategy, and we will send it also to implement the document. And I hope that compromise between the Parliament, European Parliament, and the Commission, European Commission, will be also achievable soon. Well, coming to the end, because I don't like to say one again why important it is, because of thousands of new jobs, because of these billions I've mentioned, because of the citizens' expectation. I would like to say the most important, I think, thing that we still, this is the paradox, because internet is calling like an ocean of freedom, we still have the national borders on this area. So we have to fight to break it. We have political union, we are a member of this political union, we are more served than before. In Poland you cannot even say long about that, because we are in completely new situation after the transformation after 1989, but we still need digital union, and we have a lot work to do to achieve it. Thank you very much.
So I think we have a little bit of time. Thank you very much, Minister, for this very inspiring speech. I was struck by your emphasis on the citizens. I mean, a digital agenda should be to the benefit of the citizens. That very much strikes a chord with also our research, where we very much put forward the concept of welfare of citizens. So I found that quite an important point. So the minister has kindly agreed to take 2 or 3 questions on the subject, not on general issues, but really on the subject of digital unions. So if one or 2 of you have a moment to ask a question, I would be very pleased to take a question. So who would be interested to ask a question? So Mario, my colleague Mario Mariniello, who is a research fellow at Bruegel.
Thank you for the introduction. I mean, a very simple question. I mean, as you pointed out, there are a lot of areas where you want to intervene for the digital single market. So you have e-commerce, copyright, geo-blocking, VAT framework, telecom infrastructure, but all these areas somehow requires a bit of political capital to spend on those. So I wonder whether you, from your perspective, from a Polish perspective, whether you have some priorities. You see, I mean, one area where you would like to intervene, first and spend the political capital at the beginning.
Well, it's very difficult to say, but because it's not my responsibility when we are talking about the Brussels decisions. But I feel that the most easy is that one which is even a little bit technically complicated. So the problem of roaming. Because why my answer is that? Because in the end of January, by the way, Mr. Oettinger will come. We had a common meeting in Brussels, just very open discussion for that. And during 1 hour, we've been very close to say that, of course, limited much, but it could be implemented quite fast. Maybe it's not a pure roam like at home, but it's a good step forward. I've said the case of implementation of common currency, describing Mr. Mandel's opinions. It was private, but it was registered during 19th, so I think it's not very big fault that I said that. But what was a source of success during that time? A political will. So we have political will, I feel. So then the next step is needed. If the political will is, and I hope the Latvian presidency will show the political will on that, the next step is decision. And I hope we'll have the decision, even if it will be split into parts, into phases. It will be a good direction to do the next steps on the other areas.
Perhaps one more, a second question, and then. Oh, nobody. Well, okay. I think I don't want to push too hard. So thank you very much, Minister. It was really great, and to have this inspiring first lecture on this conference. And thank you again for all the support. And I look forward to it. Thank you very much. So I think we can now move to the first panel. We are a little bit early, but that's actually good. So it gives us a little bit more time on the different panels. So if I could ask the speakers of the first panel on the floor, and then we take it from here.
Afternoon, everybody. This isn't working. It's a good digital start. Does anyone know how this works? I've got a technical problem. The audio digital. Should we? Okay, this one works. Afternoon. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Henry Foy. I'm the Central Europe correspondent of the Financial Times, and it's my pleasure to moderate this first panel. We're going to be talking about the macroeconomic effects of the digital revolution. We've just heard from the Secretary of State and from the Minister about the huge benefits of the digital single market, the jobs, thousands of jobs were mentioned, billions of euros in savings and advantages for the Union. And we're going to hopefully explore some of those issues today with this distinguished panel. To my left is Maciej Bukowski. He's the president of the Warsaw Institute for Economic Studies. The other side is Kamil Kielański. He is the chief economist at the DG for Internal Market and Industry at the European Commission in Brussels. Finally, Jan Kranke is the vice president for regulatory strategies at Deutsche Telekom. I look after quite a range of countries here in Central and Eastern Europe, and every single one of those governments wants to push digital agenda. They want to be seen as the leaders. They want to be as cutting edge as possible in technology and digital. Estonia, of course, is a country that everyone looks towards as a country that's really embraced digital. Everyone wants it for job purposes. Everyone wants it to create new industries. Everyone wants to avoid this middle income trap that we keep hearing about, this idea that if you keep growing richer, your cost competitiveness is eroded and your resources and labor stop becoming as valuable and you need new technology. But I'll tell you a little story. Before this, I was posted to India. I did 3 years in India. And I remember my local department store in Bombay, there were 13 people that would greet me on any one shop. There was the man that parked the car. There was the man that took the ticket for the car. There was the man on the security. Then there were 2 men that gave you baskets as you went in. Then there were 2 people on the first desk that offered you every single product you could be offered. Then there were 3 people at the checkout. There was the man that stamped the receipt. And then there was the man that checked the receipt on the way out that it was in your bag. Now this became frustrating after a while. And so I bought everything online, and there I met one man who brought it to my house. So we're going to explore these issues, hopefully today, and to look at the vast macroeconomic impacts there may well be. Ernest Hemingway wrote in The Sun Also Rises, probably his best book, that bankruptcy begins slowly and then comes incredibly quickly, and I feel like digital is the same. Kamil, I wonder if you could kick us off and give us sort of the view from Brussels in terms of the macroeconomic impacts and sort of how much that feeds into the discussion.
That was not what you said in the script for this panel, so I take it as an element of surprise, Henry. Okay, I have an email to prove it. Anyway, I'll try nevertheless. In my line of work, it's always prudent to quote my commissioner. So I was over, hoping to do it as well. Actually, I wanted to talk not so much about macro, because I think I would like to start a bit with the micro trends, because I think about macroeconomics as just less precise microeconomics. I was hoping to scale up some of the trends we do see at the micro level. And I think I wanted to kick off a little bit with the 3 disrupting forces, 3 disrupting trends that I do see. I would like to begin with the whole idea of sharing economy, collaborative economy, and peer-to-peer economy. There's quite a bit of uproar currently in the EU about member states reacting very differently to Uber, Airbnb, and comparable startups. And I think there's lots of attention to this. And my Commissioner Bieńkowska, said that we should not fight this, but we should align regulation to the sharing economy, because it's like finding windmills. I think this is quite interesting, not because she's my commissioner, but I think this is also very interesting overall, because I think that there's a whole debate whether you should adjust product regulation to the sharing economy, or the other way around, whether you should actually impose the regulation which is existing, the product market regulation, on the sharing economy. So I think the first disruptive trend I see is, how do we respond as regulators to the issue of sharing economy? And much as sharing economy is seen as kind of platforms, is actually much more than that, because I think the problems to sharing economy are actually in product markets and in regulation offline. So it's about access to taxi markets, about access to regulated professions, it's about access to hotels and accommodation. So much as you have a platform, Airbnb as a platform, but then the problems of access are actually basically much offline. So I think the first theme I wanted to float is how do we respond to this? The second one is disruptive factor is disruptive in terms of pricing models. I think you've heard from the minister about the geo-blocking, which the geo-blocking is just one manifestation of a specific theme, which is source pricing, which is adjusting your prices to where your customer is located. I think the second theme is how the digitalization and the big data is actually affecting the way in which companies set prices. Traditionally, they've been setting prices on the basis of country of origin. I think we want them to be nudged not to do this because this violates the idea of single market, but I think it will have consequences because often prices are adjusted based on income. And I think if we go against, as a EU, against geo-blocking or about price discrimination, it might have consequences in terms of redistribution. And it's interesting to discuss what type of consequence it will have also at the macro level. And finally, the last theme I wanted to float was the idea of innovation in general. I mean, of course, we can't all be like Germany. I mean, it's a good idea. We would like to be like Germany. But in the meantime, I think it would make sense that we also lower down the dress code for the concept of innovation. I think we often think about innovation as like a patent or technology. And yes, we will be looking for niches like this, but I think overall we can broaden the notion of innovation to business innovation. That is to say, very often, we think of innovation as something very technical, but if you think about, a sandwich, bread existed and meat existed long time before the Earl of Sandwich invented the sandwich, that he can, put meat between two pieces of bread and do it while he was gambling. So I think often a lot of innovation will come from reinventing, rejigging the existing technology. And I think that is also very important also in terms of territorial aspects of digital, because digital will displace a lot of people. The net effect likely is going to be quite positive. But in terms of displacing people, I think we should think about innovation also in this broad sense, product market innovation. I would call it also frugal innovation, because this is innovation which doesn't require so much resources, which is perhaps not so bad in the times of austerity. So those three themes, sharing economy, in terms of licensing, pricing models in terms of digital, and big data, and also innovation in terms of how we understand it.
Sorry for the blindsiding of that. Maciej, I wonder if you could talk a bit about Poland and also just Europe in general. But I mean, how much do you think the macroeconomic angle is brought into this whole debate? Whether or not it's being widely discussed enough, whether or not people are aware of it. I mean, is it something that you think is missing from the debate?
Well, I would say that yes and no. When you look at the debate in the United States, then you see that the rise of robots is something that's really in the center of the debate there, even in the macroeconomic field. And so the discussion is very hot, and the displacement of job places by robots is actually what's worrying U.S. citizens. In Europe, somehow, we are not that much involved in this debate. We are rather still involved in the debate. Can we compete with the United States? Are we losing ground? Is our industry prepared actually to compete, to participate in digital economy? We rather see those examples of success. Normally they are American, and we think that our European firms, companies are not able to compete. And I have several slides actually, and then if you look on the several slides, I would like to start with don't want to show them all, but there is a slide, the next slide probably after the next, yes. There's the overall logic behind the digital revolution, as people used to think about. That this is some kind of general purpose technology, so something like electricity or steam power in the 19th century. So something that has a tremendous number of applications in many fields. So in every industry, in every part of services. And in that sense, that's what we are witnessing right now. Robots arising, big data, open data for the government is yet another unfolding of this revolution. And if you look on every type of economic revolution in the past, like industrial revolution in the 19th century, then you see that actually what's happening, that the patterns from the past are repeating themselves. And so if you look nowadays on Europe or in industrializing Europe in 19th century, then you see that those parts of Europe that have been prepared in the Middle Ages were participating in this revolution in 19th century very smoothly and very fast. The others that have been that lost ground actually in 13th century have been losing ground also in 19th century and are not yet there today. And I would say that if we are talking about thinking about the digital revolution right now on the global level, but also in Europe, that once again there's a question: can we see any kind of cohesion in this revolution? Or maybe once again we will see that Rhine Valley, that traditional industrial center of Europe will once again become rich because they will utilize everything, and the periphery is not that much. And this is a question: who can actually benefit from this general purpose technology that are actually unfolding right now? And this is probably the major questions. Is this revolution going to leave us behind, or take us together, or actually and bring profits from everyone? Is it the flood that rises all the boats or not? And maybe this is the central question we should be asking, not only in Poland but probably in Europe overall.
Thank you very much. Of course, it was 1984 when Terminator came out and Skynet said that we'd all be being run by robots in 13 years, and we've done okay since then, I suppose. Yeah, and you work for a company that obviously is probably even 5 years ahead of what we know is coming in the digital revolution. How do you guys see the macro impact? How does that even come into the way you think about it, or is it simply a sort of quest for better and bigger and more smart?
Yeah, thank you very much for organizing this conference. I think it's an interesting topic to discuss the issue of digitalization from different perspectives. And as you just said, yes, of course, digitization is at the core of our company and is therefore one of the key things we have to cope with. So the first, as Camille in the beginning shared, the point of the sharing economy, I can of course very much support this. As most of you may know, that our slogan for Deutsche Telekom is exactly the sharing concept in the center of our core strategy. So sharing is the key and is key for us as a company. Possibly just to add a different perspective to the others on the panel, to really go more on the macro perspective side. Will digitization help productivity and growth in Europe? So I think this is really, so to say, a macro issue, and of course it's difficult to predict what is the exact outcome. But if you look at different studies out there doing research on these issues, you can definitely see that the productivity growth is supported by digitization, by using digital technologies. So there is a chance to come to a better path for growth. A second issue, what I think on the macro level will be crucial to realize, and which will have a very, very huge impact, is that digitalization goes across all industries. So we won't see, so to say, a telecommunications industry or a digitization industry. We will see digitization in every kind of industry. So even the traditional, may it be automotive, construction industry, or whatever you think of, will have an impact due to digitization. Every kind of industry has to adapt their business model in using digital elements. And if you hear about all these slogans of Industry 4.0, Internet of Things, Industrial Internet, or however you phrase it, it's all going in the same direction, that digitization is, so to say, a cross-functional element across all the different sectors. And possibly a third point, will digitization always be beneficial for everyone? So will every region or every country gain from digitization? So if I make just an analogy from economist perspective to say it's, if you look at trade theory, so most economists would agree to say trade in principle is something positive and increases welfare. But overall, if you look at trade theory, you have losing regions and you have winning regions, and you have a lot of adaptations in some countries who has to change their production structure. And I think this is a similar what we will see in the digital arena, that here we will see winners and losers, but overall the gain is bigger than the loss. But to achieve the gains, of course, we need to create an environment that we can gain from it. So we are talking about regulatory environment, we are talking about innovation capabilities, we are talking about the necessary skills from the people, and so on and so on. And so this is, I would say, the most important issue, that we set the right framework to enable the people of Europe and the business to gain by digitalization.
Kamal, is that something that the Commission sort of understands, this winners and losers concept that both the other two gentlemen have mentioned? I mean, there's obviously going to be countries that win and lose, and the debate is all about together we're stronger, and Europe needs to integrate and break down these borders. But I mean, as Maciej says, there have been regions in Europe that have always succeeded, and maybe other countries are worried that this digital revolution could mean that that gap gets bigger. Do you think?
Of course, the Commission does understand, and it's well. I mean, most of the regulation we contemplate has to go through impact assessment, and the impact assessments, which actually came from the UK as a concept, we have the issue of geographical consequences, and I think the whole cohesion policy has been understood as a method of equalizing the differences. Often it was to help with convergence and catch-up, which was happening in the same direction through trade, but I can imagine the cohesion policy can also be useful for compensating the losers. I think, as Jan said, the hope is that the net effect is going to be positive, but yes, there are differences in terms of how people are affected, and I think that really depends on, I think, Maciej's think tank work related to this, where you were trying to have a look at the composition of skills in different countries and how they will be displaced by digitalization. So I think you can talk to this. But yes, I mean, in short, of course, we look at this. I mean, of course, the question is, what do we do as the EU to compensate the losers? Because I think this was the same with product market reforms. We liberalized markets as a product market concept, but then often the member states had to shoulder the consequences, which again, the net effect was positive, but often there were losers within countries, and that's why I think, of course, it would be ideal. I mean, Mario co-wrote a brief in Bruegel where they said, well, we liberalize, but as a EU, we should also find a way to compensate those who lose. But that would require a huge redesigning of our budget policy. But fundamentally, that's partly reason of the reticence vis-à-vis the EU, that the EU is seen as a liberalizing force, and those who lose often scream louder than those who gain. So that's the political economic process. I think the idea of compensating losers in from EU budget, of course, is very attractive, but that's political fiction at the moment.
Are there examples, Maciej, do you think, of industries that have taken the lead in this, and could you talk a little bit about what you've learned from those in terms of the macro impact?
Just right. I even have a slide on it. So if you please show my slides once again. And there are several slides later. So some 5 slides later or something like that. Well, who's there? Okay, so can we move further? Oh, well, it's going, yes, and a couple of more. More or less, that's the basic idea is one more when you see the economic impact, yes. And then there's a logic, yes. So you see that from the digital revolution, you can benefit, your business can benefit, your economy can benefit. If certain preconditions are met. So for instance, that you utilize new data, new information in an efficient way in your own business. For instance, and that's what's happening right now, mostly in sales, in marketing. Yeah? So through internet, just as has been said, that the firms are trying to price their products to market better in order to maximize, as economists would have said, maximize the profits. But what's also important, what's there probably, but we are not seeing it so obviously right now, is, for instance, the better management. So we are, as human beings, are making mistakes. And in many cases, it's very likely that those machines are going to make those decisions better than us, with fewer mistakes on average, which for large businesses and the economy overall is certainly a profit. Even in transportation, if we limit the number of victims that are losing their lives every year on our roads, that this simply can be transformed to the very large number of economic gains. But also it's of course the process efficiency within the businesses. So if you measure everything on your production line, if you measure everything on your final output, actually on the thing that has been made already and is working somewhere there, and are reported on damages that are happening, then you can limit the failures of the machines, for instance, the failures of cars, and limit the numbers of complaints of your client, and limit the cost ultimately. So in general, there are huge expectations at the moment, but those fields of interactions actually are also deciding of what is happening, who is benefiting and who is not. And this is on the next slide, or even on the next. You see that this is the overall increase, and that we are seeing that the most of the potential is not due to increased competition, but basically due to business processes efficiency and data-driven decision making. That you simply know more, and you make machines decide for you, and make less mistakes. And then can you go further? And then there are different industries. And you see that, for instance, manufacturing and trade obviously are those that will gain almost 50% of the profits, because in manufacturing, at the moment you compete on the very edge. After all those Kaizen, Toyota models, etc., you actually efficiency is very high, and the problem is where can you find the new profits? And this can happen only due to the very extreme type of innovation. And however, if you find it, that the profits are quite substantial, especially in those economies that are very industrialized, like German economy, but not necessarily in those economies that are not that much. And trade, this is what's happening right now. Of course, the trade is but not only public services like healthcare, also in public administration, which is probably the hardest. Because it is the slowest mover in the picture. And however, this has implication on the next slide. You see it for the regional distributions, and we have tried to assess this with different regions. As you see, there are new member states, Southern Europe and Northern Europe. There's 3 blocks, and you will see that on the next slide. You will see that the benefits from these different areas of Europe is different. And actually the South, the potential, this is the maximum potential we assess. And the maximum potential for the South from digital revolution is probably the smallest one. And this is due to the structure of their economies, not that much industry, not that much trade. And also due to the structure of the corporate sector. Not so many large enterprises, not so many enterprises that actually can grasp those advantages, new advantages, and utilize them usefully for their profits, for their business. In Northern Europe, and also in Central Europe, in new member states, this looks different, because this is much more industrialized, and much more and better structure of the economy in terms of what type of industries they have, also better structure of firms. And therefore, this divide, digital divide, actually can't even more divide Europe. That's what our supposition is. Maybe it's controversial. I would like to hear your opinion on this.
So what's your opinion? But yeah, we will come back to that. But Jan, I wanted to ask you, I mean, that slide there, 200 billion euros in extra output by 2020. I mean, did you see that coming? Do you see the signs of that already?
Well, we as a company don't see 200 billion. No, of course it's very difficult to predict what is going up in which amount. So we definitely see growth in the areas, but there has a lot to happen to make this materialize. So as you know, in all these projections, it's a lot of uncertainty inside. And I think what we have to keep in mind, one very essential point is that we really need speed on every layer. So speed means for us as a company, we have to become much faster than we did in the past. But speed as well for the political layer and for the framework. So the changes come in a much faster cycle than we had it in the past. And therefore, I think speed is one really essential point to make a change in Europe. And if you see all the potential productivity gains, as you just described, Mathieu, I'm not so sure on whether there is such a big discrepancy in all countries. Maybe. But overall, for Europe, I see a lot of gains. What we seem to have lost is, so to say, the first round of the football game, because every big OTT players are coming somewhere from the United States, and we have none really big player in Europe. But we have a second part of a football game, and we have a chance to win. And I think what is really the big chance for Europe is the combination of industry and digitization. So we will not really be successful, at least it's my opinion, we will not be successful in trying to build a European Google. So this is not the task to do, but really to use digitization in the combination with a very good industry and innovative industries, for example, automotive and whatsoever we have in Europe. So this is really a chance where Europe can gain. But again, it's a question of speed and the necessary scale. So we are talking about in all these business on scale economies. And if we are not able in Europe to develop, I would say, some kind of clusters, then it will be complicated. So this is, I think, a game where Europe as a whole has to play together to make the gains happen.
Kamal, do you want to come back on that point about winners and losers? I mean, do you?
I just wondered a bit, what does it mean to win? I mean, I'm all in favor for football analogies, especially after our recent successes in Polish football. But yes, but that was, Last Action Heroes and others. But I'm wondering what does it mean to win, because I mean that's also related to what Maciej was saying about the South. Because when we say South is not going to benefit so much from digitalization, we mean productivity and growth, right? Would that also imply that the employment negative maybe effects are going to be lower in the South? That is to say, they have less industry, so there will be less displacement of workforce in the South compared to other places?
Actually, even larger, and this is because of the type of the labor they are actually employing at the moment. So if you are less developed, then you will face the unfolding of the first wave and second wave revolution. Yes? If you are more developed, the first wave is already behind you, and you you are competitive enough at the moment. And it is not quite clear if everything is moving very fast, whether those that are staying behind will be always okay. Maybe it's the border is moving too fast for them. It's not that clear. It depends on the speed. Basically, if you have the digitalization, the robotization of different types of jobs is very fast, that probably you will not move fast enough if you are in the tail. So it depends. Nobody is certain at the moment.
So just to go back on the winning, right? Because I think you can measure winning as productivity gain, which is different than winning in terms of net employment gain or minimizing employment losses. But I think that is often rather important to see what metric are we talking about. And finally, I think a lot of this is often linked to productivity and economic growth, and as Guntram said, and I think often it is about economic welfare. You can imagine a market whereby the net employment effect is zero, net fiscal effect is zero, where essentially even the turnover is the same, but the quantity sold will be double. But the prices are almost half. So in that sense, this is an example where consumer welfare goes up, and I think this is what we should be about, frankly, not so much about growth. I mean, the problem is that, of course, our fiscal and debt is linked to GDP. But if you assume this away, I think ideally we should be thinking about consumer welfare, and in that sense, I think the idea of getting more things cheaper can be at least set off against employment losses and other things which we tend to think of when we talk about winning. But
I mean, sort of job losses are the sort of elephant in the room, I suppose, and nobody's really sure. I used to cover the car industry for a year, and of course everybody loves Henry Ford because his idea was if you can build a car cheap enough for your employees that build the car to buy, the economy creates itself. Well, if the robots are building the cars, no one can buy them because everyone lost their jobs on the production line. Are we seeing that already? I mean, it doesn't look like it, right? People are still buying things. People still have jobs, and even though Uber's come along, not all the taxi drivers are not being able to use Uber themselves because they don't have a job. I mean, do you want to?
Except for Germans who are not buying enough. But other than that, yes. No, but you're right. I mean, there's also this related joke about a modern factory is actually essentially employing there's two employees. There's a man and a dog. There is the man's role is to feed the dog, and the dog's role is to keep the man away from the machine. So I think, in that sense, is not that different from what you just said. But I think it is happening. But there's always the question about whether the productivity growth is generating new demand. And whether this new demand is generating also employment somewhere else. But that fundamentally is an empirical question, and we often hope that the net effect is going to be higher, and has always been. So maybe it will be as well. But it's as much as a question of hope and trust, and then a measurement I think is very difficult.
Yeah, particularly on the employment effects. Nobody really knows what will be the net result yet, but I would expect that overall it will be beneficial due to the effect you just mentioned on creativity and new jobs. But I think there is a second completely different perspective on the employment perspective, maybe a bit German focused, but at least in Germany we have a shrinking workforce because we have a low birth rate. And so employment level is going, or the workforce level is going down. So digitization can even be the necessary compensation to have sufficient workforce or to enable the existing workforce to cope with the existing tasks to do. So in so to say, shrinking societies, or where you don't have a huge birth rate, so digitization may even be a help for the society as a whole.
Well, I agree. Yes, so this is what's happening probably in Japan for several years already. That they are seeing the aging society, and they are trying to cope with it with more machines in their businesses. And actually, they are quite productive in the manufacturing sector. Not so much in services, but in manufacturing, they are pretty much have the same productivity as in the United States or in Germany. however, I believe that there's also a problem, let's say, regional problem, and this is probably the biggest question mark, because that's if you, at the moment, if you have a globalized economy, then you see that the businesses are looking for competitive advantages, including the labor costs, for instance, yes, displacing certain types of the business chain to different countries because of the differences in comparative advantages. And then if everything is mechanized, that is very big question marks, can you catch up, actually? The traditional way of catching up, like China, like South Korea in the past, like Southern Europe in the past, like Europe actually in the past compared to the United States, was to compete with cheap labor costs and to work a lot, invest, and then get rich. Yeah, so basically that worked like that. And then if the rich industrialized world can produce everything solely by the hands of the machines, then this, what's the reason of constructing any type of factory far away from the market? Probably you should invest very close to the market. So, for instance, Central Europe, let's say Czech Republic, Austria, and Switzerland, and Southern Germany is very good placed. Yes, so it's very close in the center of everything, and then you can dispatch things to all the markets around. If you are somewhere in Portugal, you know, Gibraltar and everything, and then this is in Spain or in United Kingdom, and so well, that's a problem. But nevertheless, geographically, then you have a problem because it's far away from everywhere, and then so that's I think that geography will play a role also in this new world, and even much more than today. And we don't know yet what kind of world. And regarding the displacements of jobs from manufacturing, I would say it's for certain. But also there's a question mark what is going to happen in services and how fast the change will be. The last week I've read an article in the press that has been describing that an algorithm, so a robot, has passed an IQ test better than humans. IQ test so this is deep learning machine. So whatever, maybe this is the let's say the first sign that things are really starting to change, and it will be very very hard to do what we have been doing in the past. In the past, we have been simply creating new type of services or new type of goods. If the old type of work has been displaced by the machine, weaving or something like that, then we have invented something else. And at the moment, we have very fancy services, and probably even more fancy services will arise in the future. But if machines are so clever that they have IQ better than us, then why should we employ anyone to any fancy service? Well, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know.
Well, I mean, I guess the question is you erode the middle, right? I mean, film stars and presidents and CEOs have to be human beings, and, you know, and journalists. No. There are now computers in California that can write news stories for journalists. We're obsolete now. You can put a press release into a computer and it will print out a story for you. That's grammatically. I know. I'm going to have to just chair panels for the rest of my career. Gosh. I want to talk about. You talked about regulation early on and how important that is. I'm really interested in regulation in terms of tax. I mean, if we're losing car factories that are bang in the center of a village and they've got 2,000 people employed and there's excise, you know what's coming, you know what's going out, they're buying materials, there's taxation. It's easy for governments to tax a car factory. But if you're a digital champion that's based in California and you sell your stuff in Europe and you're moving the money all around, who's gaining from all this? Are governments keeping up with the speed of digital transformation that they can maintain a tax base, that they can know who's earning money where and make sure that the coffers are being filled?
Talking about taxation is outside my comfort zone, but for obvious reasons. But I think
three things that share life, death, and the European Commission.
there's a different DG dealing with this, right? That's the reply. It's not my DG. It's DG taxation, so please invite them next time you chair a panel. I think to some extent, that is not that new in terms of, VAT. Probably there is idea of taxing at the place of consumption rather than where you have the service providers. I think some of it is somehow internalized, maybe also partly because of the VAT being the revenue for the EU budget. So I think that's not that entirely new. I think, but of course, then you have to distinguish between different taxation, and I think there was a little bit. So what Jan was saying, that is to say that yes, we might have the consumer benefit from things like sharing economy and Google and all that, but where are they paying their taxes? And I think that was often the debate with Google or YouTube, also in the context of intellectual property. Where are the royalties going and where are the taxes? I think that's a more complicated. I'm not sure I have a good reply to this, by the way. So I think that probably speaks in favor of not just looking at consumer and consumer welfare, which I tend to do because of too many years spent with Mario in DG competition and the competition authority, but also in terms of value chains and where the value chains are based. Because maybe if a value chain is something which is physical, it's much easier to tax it, which is I think a little bit what Jan was trying to signal. So maybe if those platforms or if sections of the value chains we find a way to anchor them in the EU, I think then yes, that will be also a tax base, but that's the best way I could avoid your question. And
possibly, I can add some points, not specifically on tax, but I totally agree to what you've just said. We should think about on whether purely the consumer welfare standard is adequate. So we have different goals or different political goals, and consumer welfare is definitely in economics one of the most prominent one, but is possibly not the only one to judge on what is the right way forward from an political perspective. But if I take tax just as an example, I think what is extremely relevant within the European Union and possibly even beyond is a question of coherence of rules and really to be able to implement these rules and to stick to these rules. Because if you just take an example, everyone who uses whatever Google services, you go through the general terms and conditions, you just click yes, I agree, and you don't know to what you agree. And formally you're making a contract with Google Incorporated United States, and you are immediately under American law with all different standards compared to Europe, and you don't really realize it. So the question is a bit what do you need for coherent rules within the European Union just to ensure everything is treated equally, So it's not an outcome of competition, but the starting point of competition to make or to apply the same rules to the same competitors. So for example on the area of data security, data protection issues, tax issues as well. So you need to be able to apply the rules and to ensure the consistency. And I think this is one of the prime political goals to be able to steer on the political level the European Union on the success way, and not only if you take the negative phrase, you've surely heard several times, Europe is just becoming a digital point where data is produced, but someone else is using it. So it's decreasing to a digital colony. And this is definitely not what we are looking for. And so we need to have some kind of a system securing that treatment is equally among the players.
We're going to take questions from the audience, but just to give you a few more minutes to think of some. Just finally, at the Financial Times, we've gone through a pretty wrenching decade of digital change, to the point now that we now have 2 times as many digital subscribers as we have print. And that's caused a huge amount of change in the newsroom. It's meant people have had to reskill. It's meant some people have had to lose their jobs. We've had to hire people with different skills. We've had to work harder personally and do more things. You've now got to make videos. You've now got to, blogs and all this kind of stuff. Somebody mentioned, I can't remember who it was, public administration. Is there not a problem here that all these governments keep talking a good talk on digital and how we've got to push for it, but how many of them would want to lay off 1,000 public sector workers because a computer can process the tax returns better, or I'm sorry? Should they? Well, this is the point. I mean, should governments be taking the lead here and saying, my goodness, we could get rid of all these bureaucrats, processing bits of paper, because a computer could do it for us instead?
I would say that maybe it's quite opposite. Well, if the business does not need us anymore, the government will need us. Yes, and if there is a tax base, us, that are human beings. Yes, and if there's a tax base, which is also challenging, how was said, how should you tax the new value chains that are rising, but then. What you actually observed over the last 150 years or so, that was a rise of the government. Yeah, so also there was a hypothesis in 19th century economics that formulated then in 19th century that the public goods are actually luxury goods, as the economists say. So what does it mean? It means that the richer we are, the more keen to consume them we are. So we simply want to consume more public goods. We want to consume more government stuff. And so maybe if this digital revolution will displace us from businesses, maybe the government will employ us simply. Yeah. So maybe not in public administration, but public services of any kind. Yeah? So you can imagine even the new types of services. So if you are displaced, sooner or later we will be from FT, so maybe you will find a job as a PR manager in public institutions of some kind. And this is, I'm saying it seriously, because those are probably the jobs that are not that risky in terms of digital revolution. They will have to adjust, they will have to change. However, maybe they will stay there.
Scary. As a little interlude, in 1999 there were 3 PR professionals for every 1 journalist in the US. Today there is 5.5 PR professionals for every 1 US journalist. So you're right, we should all be PRs, but then who's going to write the stories? I mean, we're all just going to read. Computers will read the stories, but computers they don't need to read it. They're already passing their IQ tests. Kama, what do you think? Should governments take the lead in digitization?
Yeah, about displacing bureaucrats by machines, I think. I can only speak in my private capacity. Luckily, the job description of a EU civil servant is nebulous enough, so that no computer can displace it, because you cannot run an algorithm to execute what I'm doing every day. I mean, it could be a good thing, actually. No, but more seriously, I can't think the European Commission could be displaced. The European Parliament could be a different story. I mean, they are a bit of a different breed, and maybe not all that, indispensable. But that's of course the usual joke we have to make in presence of members of the Parliament. But I think
we've just selected one as president, so we obviously think that they're useful.
Yes. No, that's what I'm trying to say, I guess. But more seriously, no, really seriously, I think there is things happening. Already, like when you think about, one example is in public procurement, which is a huge territory where you have people being involved, and electronic procurement is not only more transparent, not only cheaper, but also is indeed a nice example of governments, or actually the community at the local level, spending money in a much more efficient way, because there's all the paperwork and all the tons of things you would normally do involving in a tender, and that's the tons of work really, and that's like a huge amount of GDP which is going through public procurement. I think that's one example where things can really so maybe not the European Commission, but places where you actually spend real money, and that can be the tendering process can be much faster, and then there is all the e-government about getting for the last 5 years I'm getting a certificate for the European School in Brussels electronically. That's huge. We've been using emails in the European Commission for the last 15 years. So I think things are moving fast, but more for those kind of things which you can indeed program. You know, the brainstorming and blue sky thinking about the future of single digital market, that's something which is very difficult to outsource to a machine. I hope you agree.
Sure, no. The European Commission and cockroaches will inherit the earth, and there's nothing else to eat.
Yeah.
Well, just to add, I'm as well a bit skeptical on whether machines are able to substitute everything. So I'm not as optimistic as you are, Mark. I really think what makes the difference between machines and people working on it is the creativity. So doing new things and doing things completely differently. So I think what we need, and this is part of the possibly change in the education system, in university system, it's more a change in the mind shift to put the emphasis on creativity and changes, and not so much on repeating knowledge. So that may be a different skill set, but it doesn't mean that computers can substitute people, at least not in this creative area. A further point, when we talked about the politicians and governance and what is going to do, I think what we haven't talked about is a completely different issue where governance in the future has a role to play, and I would call this global governance. Of course, we know the United Nations as we have it today, but what we see in the digital area is all these kind of global internet governance institutions, and what takes place there is completely different to what we know in the political process so far. So it's a bottom-up approach. It's more consistency-oriented to find a common denominator, and decisions are in fact made not by elected governments. So you can really ask the question, what is the global governance of the future? Because who is accountable for what? In democracies, you normally say the parliament is accountable for making the decisions, or the government. And if decisions are taken somewhere else, I don't want to say what is better or worse, but it's a shift in the so to say democracy and the responsibility of decisions, which is tremendous. And I think this is not really thought through yet, and possibly not really visible for everyone.
You could replace parliaments with sort of online voting, things like that. So, I mean, right, the citizens could decide these things. We're going to take some questions from the floor, ladies and gentlemen. So, yes, please, if you could introduce yourself, be very brief in your question, no sort of sweeping statements, please. And if it's to one particular panel member, please make that clear. Thanks.
Yes, I'm Ola Landström from the Swedish National Board of Trade. I think I have a question mainly for Camille and John. You were talking about these new disruptive trends, and we have also noted how trade is more and more conducted on platforms. And what is common with these platforms is basically two things. They're American and they're two-sided, which means that they grow exponentially. And they have a tendency towards monopolies. And I would like to have your point of view. Jan was mentioning the level playing field, and your point of view on how intra-European trade is supposed to be conducted on these American platforms, and how we create a level playing field. Thank you.
And do you want to kick off?
Okay, if I can kick off. I think it's a very, very relevant question you ask, because these kind of platforms are core elements of the digital exchange, and you can even ask the question on whether these kind of platforms may become the bottlenecks of the future. So if you think about on whether regulation is needed in some parts of the value chain, maybe in the future it is platforms. I don't know. Question mark. I don't ask for regulation, but at least it may become a bottleneck. See how it develops. As you rightly said, on the platforms, it's always the the kind of two-sidedness and two-sided markets, it's pretty complex to exactly define how prices should look like. I think the concept is well known to most of us, but if it gets concrete and you really want to make a test of a two-sided market pricing in a merger control proceeding, you get in trouble to set exactly the right price. So this is, I think, an area where I know a lot of research is ongoing, but still, as far as I know, I don't see a practical usage of these two-sidedness concept in, for example, merger cases or whatsoever. So it is not sufficiently clear on how you exactly define the prices, and I think this is an important issue where we need more solid research to apply it. And we need to have a close eye on how these platforms develop.
So on platforms, officially, you should talk to the spokesperson of Commissioner Vestager, and she will tell you officially what the future of platforms will be. My uneducated view of somebody who is not working on that anymore is that I think the interesting question is, why have they developed in the US? That is more of a question. I mean, I know you're thinking about the consequences in market power, which of course is important, but given that we talk in terms of very fast moving industries, why haven't they developed in the US? I think one theory about why Google developed in the US has to do with the fair use doctrine in copyright. So it's our copyright system and how copyright treated search. So I think in that sense, the interesting debate is why in the US. Now, in terms of consequences, you're right. I'm more worried actually about issues of security data, not so much about rent, but more about confidentiality and the fact that Google is always showing me the same search, and they only inject 2% randomness, and otherwise I'm just looking through my search, which is personalized to me, and I always get the hits that I want to see, which reinforces my biases. That worries me, not so much about rent, but I think these things move very fast, and I think so. The question is, why have they gained this position? But also, I remember when I came to Digi Competition 10 years ago, almost. There was this big case, Microsoft case, about tying media player to Windows. Does anybody remember that now? I think that tells you something about enforcement of those rules, that we have to be rather humble. And on two-sided markets, last thought is that. Yes, this is a fashionable theory, and that was developed by Toulouse people, Tirol, Rocher, and it was mainly developed for the purpose of credit cards and as a two-sided market. But if you think about it, it's all very elegant theory, and there's network effect, and it's all complicated. But then, just one word: Bitcoin. I mean, you can think a lot about payment systems, but then there is something disruptive which is coming. So I think we should be. Yes, thinking about consequences, but much more interesting for me is what the root cause of not having those platforms in Europe is. Maybe, as Jan is saying, maybe it has to do with data ownership. Maybe data ownership is the way to anchor those platforms in the EU, but that's a more interesting question than the consequences of market power, which I hope is going to be really transitory.
What I'm trying to say is, I think that what if we, when trying to create a level playing field and ask ourselves too much, why are all these companies in the US trying to make equivalent European, trying to create a European Google or a European eBay? We might muck up intra-European trade in the process, since intra-European trade is actually conducted on these American platforms.
Yes, but the fact that this is conducted on American platforms, to me per se, is not necessarily wrong. I think the question is, what does it mean for consumers, what does it mean for taxpayers, and what does it mean for our volume of trade and our industrial structure? I think that's the real question. But there are also, for example, from your home country, Spotify, that for some reason it sprang in Sweden, but then very quickly went to the US, and then you can blame copyright. We tend to blame everything on copyright these days, but I think that actually was part of the blame. So there is an issue of scale, and I think there is an issue of how quickly our startups can go cross-border, and often they cannot, because there is
there is uncertainty about regulation. It's not that my regulation in Poland is very different from Berlin. I just don't know what the regulation in Berlin is, right? So even if I pay the German taxes, German VAT, and I apply German wages, ideally not to truck drivers, but if I do this, then I think I still don't know what the regulation is. So I think that's part of the problem.
So I think just to add it's a question of the willingness to take risk and to innovate, and at least I personally see it in this way. It's a kind of a different culture. So in the United States, it's quite common to use I call it a beta culture. So you can launch a beta version and everyone accepts it. And if you have some faults, you redesign and start again. In Europe, you tend to do, at least in Germany, to make a product perfect before you start, and so you lose speed. And speed is on the other side the important issue to reach scale. And I think this is potentially one of the reasons why we see these platforms from the United States, because they simply start. They don't care about regulation at all. They just simply start. Even if they contradict laws, they don't care about it. They just do it. And in the end, and that's the risk in the welfare standard from the consumer perspective, the consumers think it's a good product, and therefore no politician will ever intervene, even though the product itself is contradicting existing laws. So it's a bit a vicious cycle on the one who is doing it. I don't claim that it is a better way. It's just an explanation why they come from the United States, as you just said. No?
Not to say the panel supports law breaking. Any more questions on the floor? I think there was this one in the front here, and then gentleman at the back, we'll do three, and the lady in the red jacket.
Yeah, I don't want to enter the discussion on the consumer welfare standard, of course, but it's just a quick question. I mean, don't you think that we still, in digital, we still not focus enough on outcome somehow, right? I mean, like on the, what digital can deliver, because I have the sensation that we tend to say, every euro that you spend in digital is actually going to be more than a euro somehow, regardless of how this euro is spent. A good example, I think, is investment in telecom. So I can, provoke a little bit. We tend to compare investment in telecom infrastructure, Europe and US, right? We know that in the US they invest more than in Europe. But if you look really at who is better off from the point of view of users, well, I don't know. I mean, in Europe, you certainly have a better quality and cheaper prices. So, I mean, I think one has to think about really the right metric. What do we want? I mean, how can you say that we achieved, digital progress? What is the right measurement of that? It's not just investment, but what this investment entails.
Do we have a mic in the back?
School of Economics. I would. You mentioned the losers and the winners, and I think we should throw in another dimension. It's the users and the takers and the creators. User-generated content, in other words. It's talking about the estimates were for 2012 were in the 20-30 billion euros worth of free content. That is, we're talking about a gift economy in a new sense, and I think. In the future, very soon, with our voices that this is unpaid labor simply, and it has to be, and there are business models which run on free labor, and that will have to be somehow settled. That's one of the issues of the digital age. So the user-generated content is going to come back as a backlash from the political economy point of view as unpaid labor. And that leads us to another thing. I think the digital economy is just the tip of the iceberg, because if you link it to changes in jobs, that's the loss of the old job that brings a paycheck every month. That's the problem of the task-based labor that you find in the digital sector. So with the implications for the social security funds, for the healthcare funds, that you no longer have a monthly paycheck and a monthly employment. That's the erosion. In other words, it's the final erosion of the old industrial employment.
Thank you.
Plus, just one little comment, think of the implications for the educational system. Educational system was geared for efficiency, regularity, punctuality, all these traits of the old industrial system. Now you have to entirely revamp the educational system for creativity. That's the line of Ken Robinson, if you like. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the question. The lady in the red jacket just next to you. Could you pass the Sir, could you pass the microphone along? Thanks.
Yes, hi. Magdalena Piech from the Polish Confederation Leviathan. I have a question to Mr. Maciej Bukowski. When you were talking about the division of countries that could benefit from the digital revolution, you mentioned the northern countries as potential winners because they have companies which are big enough to grasp the benefit from the revolution. And that's pretty interesting to me because could you elaborate a bit more on that? What are the conditions actually for a company to benefit from the revolution? Is it a matter of resources to implement the advanced technologies, or is it a matter of having a structured processes within the company, or something more that I cannot think of? Thank you.
It's a great question. We'll kick off with that.
Just maybe starting with this question. There's a general problem of the scale. Just we have been saying here in the panel that the first round of the match actually is already over, and we are 0-1 as with the United States. So the problem is why it has happened. And however, the second part of the match is not yet there. And the second part is simply implementing the digital revolution in traditional industries and services. And then there's a question, who can apply it better? And normally you see that the bigger are more innovative. They are responsible, for instance, for 80% of the innovation in the economy, and not the SMEs as it is often claimed. And they are better in scaling up. They have financial resources to risk. Because if you fail, if you are a giant, industrial giant, if you fail with certain project, then okay, so you lost 10 millions. Sorry, yes, sorry, but that's all. If you are a small business and you cannot afford for losing 1 million, and not mentioning 10 millions. And so this is the, and if you look on Polish economy, you see in the banking sector with large players, and then you see the innovation that are happening there in digital economy. Which is quite innovative, even on the European scale or on the global scale. There are very good services there, and the biggest players are leading. So therefore, it's important to have a large industrial manufacturers if the revolution is going to be happening in the manufacturing sector. If you are only SMEs that are actually present in traditional types of industries like glass making, that probably the digital economy revolution is not going to be that beneficial for you. So this is the difference. And coming maybe very short comment on this education system, this is a very good point, I would say. The traditional education system is suited for the traditional industry or traditional type of economy. It is not quite clear whether it is actually very good oriented toward the economy towards the economy that is creative or creativity oriented. I would say it is not, and it is very hard to imagine the economy that is centered around creativity. Right? It is very hard because it has never been so much oriented. Most of the jobs are very routine types of jobs, and so potentially they can be displaced. But who knows? I'm not that much optimistic in that sense. I would not say that it is behind the corner, this type of revolution. It is going to unfold over the next several decades, so we have time yet.
Yeah, and do you want to pick up the question from the gentleman in the front row regarding digital outcomes in general?
Yes, of course, I take up the question, even though I know that we are not always on the same opinion in this question. That's the reason for the question. No, that's all. No, I think the basic thing which has to be understood is if we don't have the fundamental infrastructure, I doubt that any of the benefits we are talking about on digitization will materialize. So the first you need to have is the high-speed internet infrastructure, fixed and mobile. Otherwise, everything is just a nice idea, but not reality. Why do we have less infrastructure investment in Europe? Just to highlight some figures, if you take the latest OECD figures, 130 euro per capita investment in Europe, 180 in the United States. If we look at the latest figures on price level, the average ARPU for mobile in Germany is around 22 euro, in the United States is 60. So if you compare these figures, it's very evident that if you get more revenues, of course you are able to invest more. So that's it's.
My question was slightly different. I was saying, we know that there are different levels of investment. The question is, what does that mean for those who are using those investments? Because I mean, if it's still better, I mean, like to be in Europe instead in the US, maybe you want to ask whether you want to invest that much, and do what the US are doing. You see, I mean, the investment is clear. The level of investment, the difference is clear. But what does it mean? How does that translate in a better, No, it's I'm finished. Sorry.
Yeah, but sorry.
It's anarchy here. We're being disrupted.
May I make one comment and one question?
Yeah, sure.
We should measure the happiness. The US customers are more happy than European. They pay more. They have more choice. They believe that they have better service, and they are happier than us. We are not so happy. So we should first work to be happier people, happier country, happier customer. This is our problem. And if I may, no, because this was a question. It was a question because. Here the problem is, if I make a short comment and the question is, where Europe wants to go? Do we dream? Because the problem in Europe, we don't dream anymore. We don't have any more. We need to dream, to start to dream. So we believe that everything can be solved through regulation. Regulation is the way to solve all the problems. Outside Europe, not only US, but also in Asia, they believe that there are other ways. Innovation, freedom. There are other ways to more competition, but through innovation, not through regulation. This is a cultural problem that we have in Europe. So we believe everything can be solved through regulation. Europe remains the most regulated region in the world. This is our problem. This is the reason why we are lacking behind in innovation. This is, I think, one of the problems. So, and this is something that I would like to understand as you see this. And at the end, before this morning, the minister made a very interesting speech on roaming, and he's right. I understand from the political side how important it is, because everybody wants to solve this problem. But to solve the problem of roaming is the end, is the conclusion. Do we need a digital single market in order to solve this problem? We don't start from the end. We should start from the beginning. So what should be done in order to create a real digital single market in Europe?
Can we get this microphone back before it all descends into chaos?
I'm sorry.
If you could, you guys can have a really, really interesting coffee break with each other. I want to go back to this question here in the back corner that was really interesting. Kamil, if you could be so kind. The gift economy, free labor. Are we seeing this sort of revolution in terms of?
Just I can't resist on happiness.
Oh, please resist.
I will not. No, because I think it's really tricky, because if you think about it, compare, my mother was really, really happy when she got the fixed line connection after waiting 1 year, 40 years ago. Am I happy that I paid 20 euros for this thing, which I'm okay. I mean, I'm not happy. It just works. So I think measuring happiness, and that was an extreme case of monopoly, as opposed to measuring happiness, when I consume this is something which is, at least to say, complicated. Now,
on user-generated content, I think that's very interesting because, of course, it's not in the GDP. Wikipedia is not in the GDP. User-generated content, we're saying, is not in the GDP. I think this is very attractive as a concept, but I think, as Maciej said, it's very, it's very difficult to see that the whole economy is working on this. I mean, you can imagine this world. This is called Brave New World, and Huxley invented this. And I think that was basically where people didn't have to do anything but leisure, and that's possible. But as long as you have to pay a Gazprom bill on your gas, and then and most of the value chains, actually, that you look at this is basically we extract from the ground, which is finite, by the way. I think that future is not very, very much around the corner. But as a concept, I think is very attractive, because if you think about labor consequences, if there are people who are displaced by technology, and yet there is a way to give them something to do which is meaningful and often unpaid, I think that's very important, because one of the issues with unemployment is that you don't have any purpose during young days. So that if there is ways of, and I think copyright exceptions will be very important for user-generated content and related issues. If there's a way to keep people busy with valuable things, even if unpaid, I think this is very interesting. But to run economy on this, I think that probably is not anytime soon.
At the risk of it being massively backfiring, can we take some more questions from the audience? This will be the last round, unfortunately. We've got to take. So we'll take these two here. This lady here first, and then this gentleman here in the white shirt. If you can introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Thank you very much. I'm the ambassador of Belgium here. I would like to add one dimension to our interesting conversation. How much do you think the potential is for countries lagging seriously behind? I mean, Africa, others, to step into digitalization and get to a decent medium income. And I think it's rather interesting to listen to you, but we still have to feed the planet in 2020. Thank you.
Totally agree. And the gentleman here, if you could. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Olaf Wojak from Adam Smith Institute. And I really liked what this gentleman here said about happiness. I think that's absolutely correct. And my question is, why do we need any regulations about digital union? We have already met with Mr. Boni concerning ACTA. We were on different sides of the story, and we already had an example how regulations deregulate users in digital area. And my question is very simple. Why can't Poland be an example for the whole Europe? First of all, to lower the taxes and to lower any regulations in the internet. This is the most important thing, because we're unhappy because we have to do everything for the government and we don't get much back. Today in Poland, we pay 60 to 65% out of each zloty that we earn to the government, and companies pay about 60 to 75% of taxes of every money they make. So this is my question is, why can't we just set an example and let the people do with money what they want, and do the free market in the digital area as it is right now? Does it really need regulations? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. We'll start with that one. Briefly, does someone want to, anarchy in Poland digital market? No? Free market?
Oh, I don't know. I have already said that actually I seriously doubt it, that when you look on the long-term trends, that you see that the government is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and this is a universal phenomenon. So you observe it in Asia, you observe it in Europe, in United States, in Australia, actually everywhere, that the government is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and this can be explained, it's one of the explanations that the public goods are luxury goods, yes, in that sense that you want to consume them. We simply vote for politicians that are providing us with new public services, so probably it works like that. but the government in the broad sense, not only bureaucracy as such, but also, I don't know, any type of institutions the government funds, the museums, the cultural institutions, the healthcare service, etc., etc. So in the broad sense, government rises. And the United States is more or less the same as in Poland, 40% of GDP.
But do we really need government to do something? I mean, right now we have almost 1 million public employees. We had 170,000 in '89. So
okay, but I don't know how much it is connected to digital revolution.
Let us leave it to free market.
In that sense, the government also participates. It's an important player because 40% of GDP is 40% of GDP. So every second penny is actually going through the government. But that's an interesting question from you, madam, that you have said, what about the losers that are losing at the moment, that have been losing in the past? And this is a serious problem, I would say, because the gap between the rich and the poor, depending how do you count, can be even 400 times. The United States is 400 times as rich as Ghana per capita, average citizens. And this is I would say that in this new world that is at the moment happening, so we are witnessing, that it's even harder to catch up, because the traditional way of catching up are blocked, are becoming blocked. However, on the other hand, you can see, for instance, that what you see in photovoltaics, for instance, there's a blockade on the infrastructure for many developing nations, that you don't have paved roads, you don't have water sewage, you don't have energy actually to start even a very small factory, very small one, the workshop, because you don't have an access to power. And so parts of the digital revolution can supplement those gaps. Photovoltaics in terms of energy, these things, yes, in terms of telecommunication. And we do observe in Africa that the banking sectors, not present there, actually arose due to the mobile phones. And recently I have seen, I'm regretting that I don't have this with me, a very nice chart. This chart was showing the result of introducing the mobile phones on the African market of fish. And then you have been observing a huge volatility of the prices there, because nobody actually shared the information there. Where are the fish on this one market and no fish on the other market? And the local market in different villages. And then after the introduction of mobile phones, actually those fishermen start to contact each other, and then the price is stabilized and no volatility anymore. And it was like that, the magic wand. So you can observe the results of digital revolution in Africa also. And I think that I am say neutral saying it. I think that the 21st century may be an African century, but it is not granted yet.
Thank you. We're going to use this as a closer, so if you could sort of explain, I mean, the ambassador's question is a very pertinent one. I mean, how can the digital revolution, will it make things better globally, or will it enhance the divides?
I still can resist again on eliminating the government called Turkey. I think, at least in terms of European federal government, I would vote against it, and so would my wife and my 2 kids when they get the right to vote. But I mean, and I do believe in public goods, by the way. As an economist, I also believe in public goods, and they have to be financed somehow. But I think more seriously, you have a point in terms of incremental regulation, I think, and then goes back to the sharing economy and peer-to-peer economy, which is likely to be at the center of the single market strategy, which my commissioner is preparing. I think the new ways of doing business are testing regulations. So just to give you an example, Uber or Airbnb, I mean, they entered the market, as Jan is saying, a bit gung-ho, but in a way you realize that, maybe you can be using a taxi service as a consumer and without a criminal record check of a taxi driver, or without the knowledge of a topography of the city, because you have an invention called GPS. So I think, if we let those new startups experiment a bit with regulation and discover through this the appropriate level of regulation, that's perhaps another way of policy making. That is to say, it's the opposite to precautionary principle. Precautionary principle says, evidence first, then I'll let you thrive. But I think if you had something opposite, at least for the startups, you're saying experiment with this level of regulation. Maybe you know, Airbnb, when you let somebody into your house, maybe I will be fine, nobody will murder me. You know, with time, at a small scale, you discover that the regulation maybe was unnecessary because you have technology. So I think if there was a way to have this principle, not eliminate government cold turkey, because I think that's of course nice, but in terms of incremental regulation, where there are new business models, I think that's something which could be interesting. On the third world, I don't feel very qualified to say, but just like Macho was saying, I think Vodafone actually sponsored a lot of research showing how much connectivity through mobile is actually leapfrogging stages of development. So I think this is very promising to see this type of work. But otherwise, I'll leave it to Jan to close.
Just as overall, the digitization is, of course, to the benefit of all the customers and all the people living in Europe. So this should be, in the end, the ultimate goal. What, of course, is necessary to make it materialize, that we have the gains from digitalization, is having the basic infrastructure. Otherwise, it wouldn't materialize. So this is a necessary first step, but definitely not the last one or the sole one, but a necessary one. And I think this is the first step Europe can take immediately. And I think Europe, as I said previously, has a good chance to make progress in combining digitization with industrial production and really make a great difference compared to other regions of the world.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your kind attention, your great questions and your interest. Thank you to Maciej, to Kamil and to Jan. Fantastic panel, really enjoyed it. Round of applause please for the panel. We now have a coffee break, recharge your batteries, and the second session will begin at 14:45.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Take a seat. So welcome back to the second panel, in which we will focus on implementation. Timing is a bit narrow. With the first panel, we discussed how important is digital progress. Here instead, we will discuss how we can achieve that progress in practice. Who is going to win? Who is going to lose? Part of this discussion was already taken place during the first panel, but I mean, here we will more closely look at what are the ideas of the European Commission regarding how to implement measures that allow us to reach a digital single market. So what I'm referring to, obviously, is the Digital Single Market Strategy paper that was published in May by the European Commission. Now, in my view, the paper is very wide and high level, and it lists a number of key areas that require action. And in my view, I mean, like, it represents a good first step. It lays down a framework to inject coherence in the Commission long-term strategy, and this is something that we desperately need. And it's fair to say that the strategy indeed has been generally well received. At this stage, there is a little disagreement with it. However, the reason why there is no much controversy around the paper is because indeed the paper is quite high level. It doesn't go into, you know, what are the measures that are actually going to be implemented. And we know that, in fact, the troubles will come when the Commission will have to put in practice what the strategy says. So the idea with this panel is really try to anticipate a little bit this controversy, to ask those tricky questions that at a certain point the Commission will have to address. Questions like how will the digital single market policies affect consumers and companies across Europe? Will effects be the same across member states? What is the role for European and national institutions? How can competition and investment be stimulated at all levels of the value chain? Think about some concrete examples. Geo-blocking and copyright. We want a single market where everybody can access content everywhere in Europe. But how do we square that with protection of incentives to create new content in all countries of Europe? E-commerce. We want to facilitate cross-border transactions, but will action against price discrimination, because this is what we are talking about, entail higher prices for lower income countries? If you have UK and Polish customers that are charged the same price, will that price be higher than the price that is currently paid by Polish customers? Harmonized tax frameworks. We need to ensure that bigger digital companies do not take advantage of their higher geographic mobility to avoid paying taxes. But will harmonization of the framework also entail a limitation of member states' tax autonomy? Investment in infrastructure and telecoms. This is something that we touched upon before. I mean, I would not use my chair position to reply to your question. But I mean, like, so, I mean, still, I think it's important to ask why we need more investment in telecom, and what do we want to achieve with that, and at what price? You know, spectrum. Is this, I mean, a coordination necessary on radio spectrum? If so, will member states lose control over mobile markets that are domestic? Will they lose revenue? These are all questions that are very tricky to answer, right? And also, I mean, like the internet platform issue, and you know, all these new businesses, the OTT players, the sharing economy. We touched upon that. Kamil touched upon that before. A lot of these great services are emerging or consolidating their success in the digital markets in Europe, and consumers indeed love them. But is there a risk that those new businesses will exploit loopholes in the regulation to get an unfair advantage? Is the Commission right in like starting or envisaging the start of this wide assessment exercise? And many others, privacy, cybersecurity, big data. I mean, like, of course, we could spend the whole day just mentioning the highlights. So a lot of tricky questions are out there, but luckily today we have an outstanding panel of distinguished speakers that I'm sure will help us to understand the costs and the benefits of the digital single market policies. So Today with us we have Michael Boni, who is a member of the European Parliament, former Minister, you're very well known here, former Minister for Digital Affairs in Poland. And then Matt Brittin, who is President of Business and Operations at Google for Europe, Middle East and Africa. Then Bruno Dutoit, who is CEO of Orange Polska. And finally, Scott Marcus, who is an economist with a long and rich experience in doing research on digital matters. So I think you are very well equipped to ask the tricky questions today. So the way it's going to work, we will have first a round of remarks, maximum 10 minutes each, well, maybe a little bit more, depending how you share this time. And then we will open the discussion, between the panelists and with the floor. So with that, I leave the word to Scott.
Well, thank you very much for those outstanding introductory remarks. And let's see if we could just get this up on the screen. I think it'll be easiest for me to talk standing. Back. Good. Okay, display mode. There we go. Good. So I'm going to be talking about winds of change blowing from Brussels. I'll try to move quickly through a fair bit of material. Those of you who have heard me speak know that my presentations tend to be pretty dense. This won't be an exception. And it works. Good. Always magical. Okay, so I'm going to be saying a few words about how we got where we are. I'm going to be talking a bit about tensions between process versus outcomes, tensions between centralization and decentralization, which is a long-standing debate in political science. I'll be talking a bit about supply versus demand and some concluding observations. Now, some of you might know that I've been a long-standing fan of Lewis Carroll and Alice in Wonderland. The companion volume is Through the Looking Glass, where Alice goes through a mirror, finds herself in a strange land where everything is a little odd or sometimes backwards. I think, as with her, making that transition through the mirror, through the looking glass, it's useful to ask ourselves, how on earth did we get where we are, and also where do we go to from here? So recall, we've got a telecom single market proposal that's now currently being wrangled through the trialogue process between Council, Parliament, and to some extent Commission. It was based on a proposal from 2013. It had, as its origins, I would say, a profoundly flawed initial concept, which is that somehow you could get a single digital market solely through regulatory harmonization. I think that this was an overly narrow concept coming from one DG within the Commission. Individual proposals that had problems as well. Where we are in the process is that about 80% of the original proposal has been deleted by the Parliament, and I would say that's a good thing. Some of the more promising portions are the parts that are now being left, which is international mobile roaming, net neutrality, and until recently, spectrum management. So at the moment, there's considerable lack of clarity whether anything will get through, and overall, the process would have to be seen as a failed initiative. I don't think one can put it more favorably than that. But how did we get there? And here I would argue that it's important to pay attention to process. It's not all about outcome. It's important to understand how we got where we got. And here you've got a Commission initiative that came with a weak impact that was failed 3 times by the Commission's own Impact Assessment Board. You've got a consultation process that never generated a proper consultation. This has been noted by the Parliament's Impact Assessment Review activity, by the way, and I think is widely acknowledged. Now, the Commission said that it lacked time to do the impact assessment, and I think here that's a symptom. The fact that they could even believe that that was an excuse for being late on the impact assessment shows how far they've gotten from doing it correctly and how long it's been since they've done one properly. Because the impact assessment is supposed to be there to help the decision makers to figure out what the consequences will be of something that they're looking at. It's there to help them understand the side effects, the costs, the benefits. Basically, it's supposed to help with the formulation of the policy. What's happened is, to a significant degree, it's evolved instead into an after-the-fact defense of political decisions that have already been reached. The fact that they claimed they had no time meant that they were doing it only after the policy had been made, without a properly informed process. So with that, I would say, Marcus's maxim number one, bad process produces bad outcomes. Okay, and this is something that we need to avoid the next time around. It's something that often doesn't get said. It's something that needs to get said. Now, let's talk a little about harmonization versus subsidiarity, which, again, is part of a broader discussion of centralization versus decentralization. Now, we know with a single market, we look for the four freedoms. We look for free movement of capital. We look at goods, services, people, all of the good things that we look for in Europe, the four freedoms. We want to reduce transaction costs. We want basically economies of scale, elimination of fragmentation. But there's also a lot of things that we care about. We care about cultural pluralism. We care about subsidiarity. We care about a whole range of national initiatives. So right from the beginning, there's a bit of a tension in our objectives. Now, if we think about the origins of the European Union, they were really trying to get away from exactly that. The European Union was founded after the Second World War, trying to get away from the intense nationalism. You've got a series of treaties that led to a progressive strengthening of the European institutions, Schengen area, the Eurozone, and so on. You've got a range of progressive steps. You've also got progressive growth of the zone, which, however, also implied progressive diversity among the member states, especially with the 10 member states that joined in 2004. So we deal with a European Union that is not all the same. Now, if we look at the arc instead of the United States, a country with which Europe is often compared, it's not too different in area or in population, and we see a very different evolutionary arc and one that's often forgotten. In the United States, after the Revolution and up until 1789, you had the United States operating under Articles of Confederation. And what did those Articles of Confederation say? Well, one of the key clauses is, every state retains its sovereignty, freedom, and independence, every power, jurisdiction, and right, which is not by this confederation expressly delegated. You know, these concepts might sound a little familiar because indeed they are. Now, the United States gave this up as a bad job in 1789. They had a range of problems with it. No president, no coherent foreign policy, difficulty in enforcing central decisions against the states. So I think if we look at this from a European perspective, we would have to say that even after the progressive strengthening of European institutions, including the Lisbon Treaty of 2009, in many respects, Europe today is much closer to the United States as a confederation than it is to the United States as a federal union. In a lot of ways, what we have, what we call a European Union, is in many respects a European confederation. And we have to sort of get real and remember that that's what we're dealing with. Also, if we look at the process leading up to Lisbon, the Irish referendum of 2008, and many of the results that would have happened in other countries had the voters been given a choice, we recognize that the European voters are not ready for a highly centralized union yet. Therefore, we have to be making intelligent choices and intelligent trade-offs between centralization and decentralization. This is not to say that more can't be done. It's said that we have to pick our options carefully. One of the arguments that's frequently used for a single digital market, especially for a single telecommunications market, is the differences in prices and in regulated charges among the member states. This is something that the Commission produced in 2012. It's correct, by the way. What it shows is the deviation over several successive years, leading up to 2011 being the rightmost bar in each column. And what's it showing? Well, it's showing price basket, sort of average prices for the fixed network, for the mobile network, regulated prices for local loop unbundling, and so on. All of the regulated prices that telecoms network experts will know well. Termination rates in the fixed and mobile network. And they're different. They're getting a little less different over time in some of these categories. You see that these, for example, local loop unbundling prices are declining in the difference over time. What's the number that's shown here? It's the coefficient of variation. It's a measure of how different things are. It's the standard deviation divided by the mean. Okay, so, well and good, but how different are these things going to be? How different can we expect them to be? How close can we expect them to become over time? Now, can we really expect these numbers to be less diverse than many other key indicators, many of the key things that drive the costs for these things, like labor costs, like construction costs, like disposable income, like consumer willingness to pay. Can we expect these numbers to be less different than those numbers? You know, sort of a 5-minute exercise. If you look at GDP per capita across the member states, you find it's also pretty different. GDP per capita in countries like Denmark and Sweden is somewhere north of 40,000 per year. GDP in countries like Romania and Bulgaria is somewhere around 6 or 7 or 8,000 per year. A very wide disparity. If you simply do the arithmetic, you find a coefficient of variation for GDP per capita, which surely correlates with things like labor costs and disposable income. You find a disparity that is greater than any of the things that the Commission has tended to worry about in telecoms. So, yes, we should be doing things to make things better, but we shouldn't panic. You know, this is part of it's simply a logical consequence of where we are and where we came from. A couple of words about supply versus demand. I would argue that a lot of our approach towards achieving a single market has been focused on supply-side measures, supply-side attempts to establish broadband across the European Union. Of course, we need broadband. That's not the question. But important to remember is that the amount of broadband that's deployed isn't exactly the same as how it's used or how much it's used. If you simply take statistics from a well-known source, this comes from the Cisco VNI, many of you will be familiar with it. If you divide it by the number of households, you can get an estimate of the amount of usage per fixed subscription in different countries around the world. And we see that usage is very high in countries like the United States and Korea, rather low in many of the European countries like France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and the UK. Not surprising, I would argue. But and by the way, the blue here represents audiovisual services, which of course is a key driver here. So in the US, this huge spike is almost certainly a Netflix spike. The UK has rather high usage, and a lot of it surely has to do with catch-up video for the BBC. Interestingly, this usage doesn't correlate nearly as closely as most people would expect with the speed of the network. The United States, which has not very fast networks, has very high usage. That's probably why you get a lot of complaints there. The UK, which has clearly slower broadband on average than Japan, nonetheless has higher usage per capita. Nobody would have predicted that based solely on the speeds of the network. So I think there's some messages here. Certainly part of it, if we look at whether demand drives supply, it's pretty clear people will build out where there's an interest in the services and a willingness to pay for them. Conversely, though, does supply drive demand? Well, too little supply will restrict demand, that's clear. But the ability of excess supply to drive demand is either more complex or operates over much longer time frames than most people assume. What this means is, in my mind, that you don't solve Europe's broadband problems solely with bulldozers. You need a much more intelligent mix of solutions. Otherwise, you end up with big, empty networks, which we don't want. A purely supply-side approach is like pushing on a rope, I would argue. Actually, for this reason, I was happy that the digital single market proposals, the newer proposals out of the Commission, include things like copyright, include things like geo-blocking. I would argue that the one area that they don't touch relates to the creation and distribution of audiovisual media in the first place, where the fact that so much of it in Europe is generated for single nations or single language groups is clearly an issue. Okay, so a couple of concluding observations. Notably, there's no sharp dichotomies here. Very little of this is either or. It's not process versus outcomes. You need good process to get good outcomes. We need to work with a richer palette of instruments. You don't get there just by regulatory harmonization. We need to have the right balance between a centralized approach versus a decentralized approach. We need to be sensitive to the fact that the countries, the member states, truly are different, and we're not going to wish away the differences among the country. They take time to work on. And we need, again, a sensible balance between demand-side measures and supply-side measures. You can't do it just on one side. So all of that, in my mind, would argue that we need the right balance between ambition and realism. This is not to say that nothing can be done. It means we need to be realistic about what we can achieve. And for that reason, I saw the digital single market proposals as much, much more promising than the ones that came out of the Commission in 2013. They've started from the right place. They're looking at a wide range of problems, not just telecoms regulation in the narrow, confined sense. They are looking at issues that relate to the demand side, not just the supply side. They are using a much wider range of policy instruments. Not everything is regulation. There's a lot of policy options that the Parliament and Council have that I wouldn't classify as classic regulation. Also, they started with a good collection of evidence which could provide the basis for a proper impact assessment. So again, they seem to be approaching the process in a more promising direction. So we're off to a good start. This is important. The open question now is, can we get to a good finish? I'm sorry that the Commissioner isn't yet here yet, because in many respects this is really a charge to him. But we started with Alice, so I'll end with Alice. This is the Red Queen who says, if you want to stay where you are, you need to run very fast. If you want to get anywhere, you have to run far faster. And the charge is largely to the Commissioner, the Vice President, and the rest of the Commission, and the other European institutions now to see if we can actually move this. I left pointers to a few of my papers, and with that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot also for bringing this wind of optimism. That's very good. Okay, so yeah, please. Michael, I leave Michael Boni, the word to you.
Firstly, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you very much for this inspiring presentation, because I think that at the beginning we should understand what is the focus of our discussion. I fully agree that the document presented, announced by the Commission is very promising, but it depends on us how we will implement it. First remark. I think that this is a good time and a good opportunity to discuss that when we are talking about digital single market, we are talking about digital revolution or something like digital game changer in European economy. So we are not talking only about telecommunication. We are not talking only about e-commerce and better conditions for e-commerce. We are not talking about geo-blocking limitations. We are talking about everything, because digital is, as Maciej Bukowski earlier said, general purpose technology. So it is changing everything, and we should understand it. Why it is so important? Because we should understand that through short time probably the European economy will change, and I hope that the European economy will change, because this is our competitive advantage. We have a good industry in Europe, but we need Industry 4.0, so it means that we need changes in all areas, not only in the ICT sector, but ICT in all sectors. So we are during the time of initiation of the discussion on car connected, of Internet of Things, on telemedicine, on mHealth, e-health, and so on and so on. And this is very important to understand, because I think that this is a good area for balancing demand and supply. I can imagine the situation in Europe when people, patients, will wait for new services, new medical services, much more organized due to using new technologies. And I think that it means that we as legislators should adjust the framework for those new solutions. What does it mean, adjust? I think that, and this is the third point, I think that it is important to understand that we need new right framework, regulatory and non-regulatory. So it means that in some areas, from my point of view, it is related to data protection, today member states decided to approve the data protection regulation, so we in the parliament will be able to start the trilogue on the 24th of June. We will have the first meeting, and I think that this is important for creation of the balance between users, consumers, public authorities and business for trust, because using data, also personal data, is very important for this new economy. In addition, I would like to express that also we should remember that the core of this digital economy is related to processing the data, collecting data, processing, transferring, using, reusing also, and this is the background for the new economy. But this new economy in some areas requires strong regulations as harmonization at the European level. When I'm talking about strong regulation, it means harmonization, because from my point of view, it's better to have one solution than 28 solutions, because those 28 solutions are destroyable for developing the business also, and we should remember about it. But at the same time, we should remember that we have many additional possibilities for so-called soft law. It means guidelines prepared at the European level. It means some possibilities for certification schemes. And also it means to implement in Europe the rule of code of conduct, which means cooperation among companies for indicating that, okay, those kind of rules we will implement, and with full respect we will develop those kind of rules. This is important to understand it, because this is the only way for breaking this crazy discussion between European digital single market and American giants who are very dangerous for European digital development. Yes, okay, I'm saying that if this is the price which we in Europe should pay for much bigger adjustment to the digital challenges, so okay, we can say it. But on the other hand, of course, we need fair competition for all companies, so it is also obvious, and we should remember about it. What is important in this new understanding of the framework, not only regulatory but also non-regulatory? It is related to the rule that in the competition between legislation and technology, technology will win. Technology is faster, and it would be crazy to discuss that we need regulate something, because it will kill the business. For example, when we are talking about app economy, the sector was established 7 years ago. Now the value of this sector is 100 billion US dollars. And I think that through 4 or 5 years we will have 26 billion applications per year. So it means that we will have, as individuals, one new application through 1.5 week. So the word will be as application. And of course, when we are talking about mHealth, we understand that in some areas we have some kind of well-being applications. And we don't need special strong regulations for that. In some areas, we will use medical applications, which will be very important for doctors for the assessment of the state of our health. And of course, it needs some rules, it needs, of course, some requirements and standardization. So I think that, and this is the last point, we should discuss now, when we think about future of the digital Europe, also about standardization and interoperability. Because interoperability in Europe is the expression of the lack of the possibility to communicate. So we need to create a new model of interoperability, and we need to overcome this fragmentation. Because, this is the last point, the fragmentation is very dangerous for the development of digital economy in Europe when we think about our future advantages. In the last panel we discussed about Africa also. So 20% of African people now have possibility to use mobile devices. Through 10 years it will be 80% probably. And they will be much more adjusted to understanding this world, so we should go forward.
Many thanks. So just quickly, do you see then a risk in this assessment that the Commission wants to launch on internet platform, that the Commission will come up with too much regulation, according to what you just?
You know, when I analyze these 16 initiatives, in some of them we have to analyze, to look, and to start the discussion, as in platforms, yes? So I think that we need the discussion on platforms, yes? Firstly, after that we can discuss if we need regulation or not. In some areas which are, I think, clear, there are some possibilities for regulation. In some areas, I think that we should start discussion. For example, about it's not easy to say it because also Commission is rather cautious. Consolidation of the telecom market and harmonization of decisions related to spectrum, allocation of the spectrum. We need harmonization. We need harmonization because, on the other hand, we will have many problems with starting our thinking about new technological solutions. So I think that Commission is on the good track. I'm not sure that the regulation will be the main goal, but of course when I'm talking with my colleagues from European Parliament about this framework, regulatory and non-regulatory, some of them are asking me, okay, this is our job to prepare regulation. But on the other hand, I think that we should understand that, and that at that area we need good framework, which doesn't mean that it is only regulation.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Matt, please.
Thank you. Do you mind if I stand? Because I think I might fall off the edge. I wonder if you've ever been to an event where something made you so excited you had a little tingle down the back of your spine. Have you ever had that experience? Maybe here earlier today? I don't know. I was lucky enough to go to the opening ceremony of the 2012 Olympics in London, my home city. And there was a moment in that. Thank you. I'm going to make you work by walking around as well. So you can. There was a moment in the opening ceremony of the 2012 Games where Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web, was revealed to be sitting in the centre of the stadium, and the words, "This is for everyone," flashed around the stadium. And I think that's a good point at which to start a discussion about the digital single market, because it's about every one of us, it's about everybody on the planet, it's about all of our culture, and it's about the commerce that can fuel growth for European member states and for the prosperity of our children and our families. So that's a good place to start. And you mentioned, Mikhail, the phenomenal growth we're going to see in Africa. In fact, the internet population is set to double between now and the end of the decade. So between now and 2020, we go from 2.5 billion to 5 billion people online, 40% of the planet online to 80% of the planet online. That's why this is so important to be doing now, and that's why the point that Scott Marcus made about speed from Alice is such an important point for us. So I just want to talk a little bit about what I see from my perspective as a European who spent the last 10 or 15 years working very closely on the internet and how it's used by people and by businesses and by culture. Can I ask you a question as well about your own personal life? Would you mind? No disclaimer required. How many of you have a connected device with you? Just say yes.
Coming from Google is a bit...
Do you have an agenda you'd like to share with us? So I always ask for permission, as Google does. So how many have two devices? Say yes, yes. 3? 4?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, I could go on, but I'm making the point. We're all connected today. And in today's world of connected people,
then every business is already a connected business. Every business has to be a digital business, and every country has to be a digital country, because the internet and the real world are the same place. So I don't think it's too late for Europe and European economies to jump in here, but the moment is definitely now. And I think that Europe should be optimistic, outward-looking, and open when looking at these opportunities. There's a company here in Warsaw called Beefsteak. It's a traditional butcher's shop, and it sells premium meat products. And for the last 5 years, it's been selling them online too, and 30% of their sales come from across Poland, and they're now starting to sell to customers in the UK, in Sweden, and in Denmark. That's the kind of business that's an internet business today. Forget Google and Apple and Facebook and Twitter. The real internet businesses that are driving the internet economy are traditional businesses operating in a digital world. And they can grow and expand and find customers in ways that were never possible before, and the potential customer base is about to double. That's why this is so important. It used to be only the very biggest companies that could access the kind of technology, the kind of skills, the global scale marketing and distribution that's available to everyone today. So now every business can be a global business, because every business is digital. And the opportunity to become a micro multinational stands in front of a company that's a butcher in Warsaw. That's the economy opportunity that we stand in front of. Another company in Poland that I find fascinating makes personalized wallpaper. There's a traditional kind of business, and they've set out an ambition to be the world's leader in this field by 2017. And they're already well on their way. They've grown from 2 to 60 people, Pixars this is, and they're on track to be a world leader by 2017. This was never possible before, this kind of technology, and they're showing Europe the way. So if you look at the internet economy in Europe, measured by people buying things online, companies buying things online, the cost of access and devices, and you look at all of that and roll it up, it's about 3 to 4% of GDP. It's growing faster than pretty much any other sector. The UK is at 9% of GDP already. And Europe's pretty good at this, in fact. Businesses that are online are growing faster. They're growing between 2 and 4 times faster than those that aren't. They're creating jobs. They're creating exports. And Europe is actually a net exporter when it comes to the digital economy, unlike the US, which is a net importer. So it's worth bearing that in mind. And when you think about tech startups, we often think that we're behind in Europe, and we are. But we're not as far behind as you might think. If you look at the number of billion-euro tech startups over the last few years here versus the US, we're about 2/3 of the US. As I travelled here this morning, I was given this, which is a newspaper, and it tells us that in the last year there were 13 unicorns, so $13 billion or billion-euro tech startups in Europe. So we're picking up the pace, and centres, cities around Europe are becoming bigger and bigger in this field. So Europe has a lot, I think, already in play in this internet economy, and plenty more to do. What does the European Union need? In my view, apart from pace, as has been so well articulated, it needs this attitude of optimism and openness and outward looking to be able to grasp the opportunity of one rule book rather than 28. At Google, we work with hundreds of thousands of businesses across all of the EU countries, and it's very difficult to connect from one market to another with 28 different rule books. It's easy to say we should have one rule book, but who will be the person who decides on which rule book? Because everybody would like their own. So that's a challenge, and I think just getting that sorted will make a huge difference. It's a real barrier to new technology. You mentioned the connected car. At the moment, I can drive my car across a border, but if it's connected, can I drive the data across the border? It's not clear. And clearly Europe's going to be held back in innovation if that kind of thing is not sorted out. So the rule book is vital. Similarly, skills. There's a massive problem in skills, particularly in Poland actually, but across the EU. The EU itself has predicted 900,000 jobs will go unfilled over the next few years because of a lack of digital skills. And there's a real concern that we will fall behind in innovation if we don't do that. And then being open to the opportunity so that consumers in Europe can access the best services from around the world, that European businesses and culture can connect with the best in the world. So it's possible that people might raise, well, what's the role of a big American technology company in all of this? Surely you're not good for all of us. And as a European who's proud to lead our business and operations in Europe, with about 9,000 people who work for Google across Europe, most of us Europeans, we're passionate about Europe being successful here, and we see all of these opportunities day in, day out, and we see small businesses in particular leading the way. So we're definitely trying to play our part, and Google only succeeds if our partners and customers succeed, and we have many hundreds of thousands of them here, as I say. So we've pledged to try to address the skills issue, which is one thing we can do something about. So we know how to help people get digital skills, and we've pledged to train 1 million Europeans over the next couple of years with digital skills that can really help those businesses grow. We try to help on the startups front. We are later this year going to launch our campus venue in Warsaw itself here in Poland to try to bring startups together. We already have one in London, and we're launching this week in Madrid and in other centres in Europe to try to help startups come together and seize the opportunity that stands in front of us over the next few years. And I think overall I want to just leave you with the thought that however the politicians are able to bring together the agenda for change and to make it easier for our entrepreneurs to connect with the rest of the world, they can't do it soon enough. Companies like Google are a set of tools that these entrepreneurs can use, and we're proud to be part of the mix. If it's not us, it will be somebody else. We believe that people should have access to the best tools and the best technologies, and consumers should have access to the most competitive and innovative services all around the world. And if we do that, then Europe can really thrive, because we're starting from a good position. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Quick question though for you. So you said that everybody can grow and enter a global market thanks to digital, essentially. I mean, even like the small shop. But isn't it true that big digital companies might exploit advantages that they get not really because they are more efficient, but just because, for example, they can play around more the tax, different tax regimes that are, for example, in Europe. So I mean, like think about Amazon and the small bookshop. Okay, certainly Amazon is more efficient for a number of reasons, but there are also some things that come from the regulatory framework that because Amazon is big and digital and flexible somehow somehow has an advantage with respect to small businesses. So I wonder really, I mean, is it generally true that the digital is making for small companies easier to become big, or maybe it's putting them at a disadvantage from some?
I mean, I think if you look as a consumer at your own experience, how much choice you now have, whether it's connecting with digital content or buying products and services online, you have more choice than ever before. So I think it's clearly the case that, and when I talk to many of our customers, they say, we like the fact that you provide us with a level playing field to compete with the big guys. Yeah. The big guys say, we don't like the fact that the playing field's not level in our favor anymore. Sure. And that's the dynamic. Yet, absolutely, you need to ensure that the rules and the regulations and tax and so on is up to date enough to deal with new forms of content. But it's up to the politicians to set a simple framework, and I would just ask for it to be simple so that companies can get on with delivering products and services that are innovative, competitive, generate wealth and prosperity, and delight consumers.
Sure. Well, thanks. Bruno, word. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity to be part of this panel today. I will be brief because I think all the major topics were already presented and addressed by the other panelists. I'm a member, let's say, in a telecom group, traditional, let's say, Orange Polska, which is part of, let's say, European and world group, which is Orange. I will just say that we are obviously very happy to see that once more time, let's say, digital economy is at the heart of the agenda of the Commission, particularly the new Commission. Already, let's say, 2 years ago, the previous Commission was insisting on that, but there was not very concrete, let's say, realization except in some aspect. But now everybody recognizes that ICT, let's say, is development of ICT in Europe is very much mandatory, let's say, to develop productivity, job, and generally, let's say, to support economic growth. So we are, I think, as you say, even if it remains a bit general, let's say, everybody is quite happy with the strategy which was presented beginning of May, the so-called DSM, Digital Single Market, which, let's say, present very comprehensive, let's say, set of proposal of direction, let's say, both for consumer, for company, let's say, for growth, economy of growth in general. We have maybe 2 points which are important, let's say, is to not to forget that already we have a big gap, let's say, between European Union, an increasing gap in terms of digitalization, let's say, with probably North America and Asia, and I think it is time to address it. I understood it was not the case 10 years ago, now it is the case, and year after year the gap increases, So we have to go fast, and when we see in this strategy, DSM strategy, that probably the first legislative measure will be proposed only next year, it means probably concrete implementation only after possibly 3 years or more. I think it's a bit a concern, And the second point is that it is not too much, as I said, too much visible in this strategy, that there is really a gap, increasing gap between Europe and the rest of the world, at least some part of the world, Asia and America, which is important to address. And you know as well that some big European operator, including Orange, a few months ago, it was in autumn when the new commission was installed, were presenting together a sort of document. The name is Manifesto for Digital Growth, covering a lot of topics, let's say, to both, let's say, recommend, let's say, to recover, excuse me for English, the competitiveness of digital economy in Europe, and at the same time, let's say, to encourage to help investments, not only in network, but as well in platform. And we believe, looking at the current, let's say, strategy, the draft, that it is already well addressed. And everything is very relevant for Poland. You know that Poland is, according to official, let's say, European Digital Index, we are number 23. I think in reality we are a bit better, but number 23. Definitely the natural place of Poland in the digital index is among the top 10. And donc we have to, with the support of this DSM strategy, to step by step, probably within future, to come back in the one of the first place in Europe. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot. Well, I have a question for you, but also for Scott, and I mean for everybody. In fact, I mean, I think is a very general question because, I have the feeling that more than in other sectors, the debate somehow has been a little bit antagonizing. We hear a lot in digital, things like you are a monopolist, or you are getting a lot of market power and you are going to abuse it, or you are abusing it. Or on the other side, maybe you are a protectionist. I mean, you are trying to, consolidate more and get more money, etc., etc. I mean, it got really kind of very acute. I think this discussion, and very emotional. More than in other sectors, that maybe are confronted with similar issues. So I wonder what's the reason for that, and what's the role of the academic community as well. I mean, that we got so far from the substance somehow, because at the end of the day, what we want. Maybe we share the goals, or everybody, all sides share the same goals, increase welfare at the end. Maybe we can differ on the distribution of the rents, but at the end there would be like a scope of, in my view, to improve the process. Also by improving the dialogue really around the substance, and maybe the digital single market strategy is an occasion for that. I don't know whether you want to share your views on that, or whatever. Yeah.
Well, I think you're raising exactly the right question here. It's quite clear if you look at, say, network operators and those who provide content and applications, they're part of the same value chain. The value chain only works if everybody makes money. Now, we spoke in the first panel a bit about two-sided or multi-sided markets, and so there's a legitimate discussion about how the surplus gets spread around. But basically, the two sides have to find common ground here, and one way or another, everybody has to make money.
I'm not sure there is really an antagonist, but what is true on the traditional operator side, there is a concern, because not only because profits are lower than 10 years ago, which is not just because, as explained, there is a gap increasing between Europe and part of the world, which is mainly, not only, but mainly linked, let's say, to lack of investment. Donc we need desperately, let's say, measure, regulatory or not, let's say, to encourage investment. And probably it come about, consolidation, it come about a bit less or different regulation in some aspect. And it works. We have already a lot of examples now in Europe, very concrete, since mainly 2 years, including in Poland, or a bit different approach from regulator or parliament, let's say, is helping investment. It's the case concretely in Poland with our company, with Fiber to the Home.
But I think you made the point that it's sometimes an antagonistic debate, and I certainly sometimes notice that. And I think fundamentally it's partly because of the speed of change. And from where I sit, I see that people, consumers, citizens, have more access to information than ever before. And that's quite threatening in a world where some of those things were controlled much more tightly. And the dynamics for the economics of competition, I was talking about this, small companies can now reach a global market in a way that only the biggest could. So the economics of competition are changing quite dramatically and fast. And in that world, of course, people are concerned about protecting their ability to be successful. And I think there's a legitimate debate about the extent to which we want to protect the past from the future, or to protect the future from the past, and that's one of the tensions I think that that Scott was alluding to in his very neatly summarised view of the tensions here. I just see the enormous potential for us as European citizens in leaning forward into this and innovating and unleashing the natural entrepreneurialism of Europeans in this world where you can connect at so much bigger scale.
I'm not afraid of these antagonizing discussions, yes, because I think that they can be fruitful if we want to achieve some common goals. And I think that it is very important and needed. Remember, 2 years ago, everything was clear, but we have no possibility to start real discussion about this game changer, digital game changer in Europe. Yes? So I think it's better to have some tensions and conflicts from time to time and start to achieve goals which are important for the future. Secondly, I fully agree that and this is, I feel the lack in this document, yes, because this is a small paragraph in digital single market strategy for Europe, small paragraph on investments. But this is a key question. Probably we need 200 billion euro for investments in the infrastructure, because only 20% of Europeans have access to 4G. We should finish our work on 4G and we should start the discussion on 5G, because when we are talking about Industry 4.0, in some areas, in e-health for example, in car connected, we will need solutions which will be based on transferring information through milliseconds. Milliseconds, yes. It will be also very important for users, for consumers, for my video, for access to movies, to music, and so on and so on. But also it will be very important for industry development, yes, and for completely new services. So we need to invest at that area, and also we should create better conditions for those investments. So this is the question. When we are talking about roaming, we are talking about consumers, but we should remember about operators. We should remember about telecoms. When we are starting the discussion on consolidation, we should remember that, probably it will be much more effective for the future to start the consolidation of the world with respect for all competition rules and be fair at the area of competition. And the last point is related to skills, as you mentioned, because I think that this is also mentioned in this strategy, because this is a competition, the competence of member states. And but I think that we should start discussion in our member states on education and how to adjust educational systems to the new industry in the future, to the new economy, and to the new skills, as for example coding, as a new logic, yes, because this is not only simple skills. Very often I'm listening to the people and they are saying, young generation, this is they are natives, they well prepared. But we should remember that their skills are focused on some kind of well-being or on lifestyle activities, not on workplace activities. So changing the area of education is also important as a complementary for the digital revolution in Europe.
Thanks a lot. I think you're making a very important point about investment and the need. I mean, everybody has made that point. The point is really how to achieve that, right? And I think Scott made a very good point about the demand that is often ignored, and now there is some optimism concerning the digital single market. With consolidation, the question is, if you increase, if you actually decrease competition and you have more resources that are coming to telecom operators, would they have the incentive to invest? Because that's the key question that we want to ask, is the incentive to invest. But I mean, please feel free to, who wants to?
One sentence only. You know, I think that we should remember when we are talking about consolidation of the telecom market that through many years we have discussed and implemented solutions which were important for competition at the national levels. But now we need Europeans' possibilities for being competitive all over the world. So this is completely new view. And if we want to think in those kind of terms, so I think that we should redefine. I'm not saying that, okay, start consolidation, yes, but we should start a discussion on that subject.
I think that's a very fine point. What I was going to note is that there's a series of papers by an economist, Aghion, A-G-H-I-O-N, and to sort of boil down a much longer argument, what he has is a fairly good quantitative argument that if you want to maximize innovation and investment, you need both. You need competition and you need good profitability. So this is another one of those areas I was talking about where you don't have a sharp dichotomy, you really need both. I'm increasingly feeling that the European system, the European regulatory approach may have squeezed a little too much profitability out of the large operators, and that maybe we need to look for ways to strike a slightly different balance. That doesn't mean throwing out our competitive system. I actually thought that the work the Commission was doing a year ago on the recommendation on non-discrimination and costing was a promising step in the right direction, because it basically maintains the competitive structure, it maintains non-discrimination, but provides a little more pricing flexibility to the extent that non-discrimination is maintained. And I think that maybe that's a signpost of where we might be able to take things.
Yeah, I mean, I deliberately didn't pick up on the sort of infrastructure side in my remarks, thinking that others would probably do more. But I think if you look at the facts, it's the case that telcos in Europe are earning a significantly lower return on capital than those in the US, and that consumer prices are generally lower than in the US. So I think you look at the combination of competition, fragmentation of the markets, return on investment, and spectrum auction prices and tactics of governments here, and you say, well, if one of the most important things is for every consumer and every business in Europe to be able to access 5G, which I think is vital, then we need to make sure that that's facilitated by the regulatory framework, because it's as vital today as the railways or electrification were some decades ago. How many microphones would you want? I'm just going to keep this one here.
So no, that I keep the control.
Just note what's happening here.
I like it.
I'll give you mine.
I like it. Oh, what? Yeah, just wanted to say that.
I'm sorry, I was just joking.
No, that's totally fine. I mean, like, I just wanted to say that, of course, it's a fair point. But on the other hand, I mean, like, one has to really go and check what are the real causes for, say, Europe lagging behind. For example, the delay in the spectrum auction. I mean, that's so. I mean, it's. But I agree. I mean, like, let's start the discussion. The discussion is of course very important. We have about 15 minutes before the Commissioner will join us, I think. And I'm happy to open the floor for questions. So you have Guntram, you have quite a few there, there, and there. We take 3 questions for the speakers. Please identify yourself. Well, I mean, we know the 3 of you.
Well, so since the Commissioner will be coming in 10-15 minutes, I was wondering, perhaps a question to Scott on the digital single market. I mean, if you were the Commissioner now, which were the, let's say, 2 or 3 political fields that you would attack first to really advance the digital single market? Because you emphasized very much the demand side as well as the supply side. So if you had the political choice, which are the areas where you would get the biggest bang for the political buck you put in there?
Shall we collect all of them? It's probably easier. Yeah, please. You.
I like to earn my money. Here we go.
Thanks. Okay. Well, first of all, something to Mr. Boni. I have to absolutely disagree. Once again, I'm Olaf Wojak from Adam Smith Institute. it's delusional saying that applications for smartphones or any applications need regulations. Sorry, but if someone wants, you made an example of a medical app that a doctor uses, it really doesn't need any regulations. Right now we don't have too many regulations during applications and people are not doing wrong with them. So it's absolutely up to free market which applications are on the market and which ones do we want to use or not. And also it's really sounds silly if we're talking about $200 billion to the infrastructure that we have to put in Europe. It's up to the large companies if they want to invest or not. And if there weren't too many regulations, probably there would be money to invest and to build up more customers as we have. But I have a question to Mr. Marcus. Which regulations are needed to have a good working digital union, which are absolutely needed that we cannot work without?
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. The last question.
Thank you. Yes, I think every panelist has talked about the need for speed, and I would like to use an example of a great regulation or directive that has helped a lot with the kind of trust that Mr. Britton was talking about in getting brick-and-mortar shops to trade and to trade cross-border, and that is the Consumer Protection Directive, and that took like 12 years. From the initial discussions until the final implementation in the member states. And if you look at other initiatives from the Commission, like the Data Retention Directive or the Cookie Directive, you can look at how regulations work when they are too hasty. And I would like to know how what your opinions are on how we consolidate the need for speed in this really fast-moving markets with the need for well-funded regulations you were talking about, Mr. Marcus.
Do you want to start?
Sure. Well, there's no easy questions in the group, but I'll toss out a few thoughts. First, to Dr. Wolfram's question about what to do first. I don't have a snap answer to that, but there are two main criteria that I would use in making the choices. The first is, what's the likely return? And here, I know a lot of our discussion earlier was about consumer welfare, but I tend to look at societal welfare, which is the sum of consumer welfare plus producer welfare. Really, you want to maximize the combined total of the two, I would argue. And that's exactly the kind of thing that, under good process, you would be looking at in an impact assessment. That's one of the two sides. The other side is simply how easy or how hard do we think it is to actually get where we're going. So for me, actually, I consider one of the larger payback areas, but also one of the harder ones, to be associated with the creation of audiovisual content. Only about 12% of European audiovisual content is designed for use in more than one member state. We have, I would argue, national subsidy programs that work at cross purposes with the rather small European level programs that tend to deal only with pre-production and post-production support, not with production itself. And basically they encourage production of large numbers of films that are commercially inefficient. We produce 2.5 times as many films per year as Hollywood, and yet we make only about a quarter of European box office is European productions. So this is one that nobody wants to touch, but I think it would benefit from some work, but probably also can't be fixed quickly. In any case, though, I think properly focusing on these issues through the impact assessment process, applying good process, looking at expected time to get someplace against expected returns is the right way to do the prioritization, and I think it can't be done that quickly. Things just take the time they take.
Okay, but firstly, I would like to say that I didn't say that we need regulation for app economy. I have said precisely that in some areas, when we will need apps for decisions of doctor, we need some regulation, some standards, because it will be related with personal data, sensitive personal data related to healthcare, yes, and people should know that this is due to standards. Secondly, Now we have many applications related to, for example, measuring blood pressure. And the differences are 20 points. So this is not a good information for making by the doctor, taking by the doctor decisions related to my health, to therapy and something like that. So I have said that we don't need regulations in many areas, as you mentioned also, but in some areas, and this is a question, I'm working in the European Parliament in the working group on health, yes, and we are considering, not for thinking about over-regulation, in completely different direction. We are thinking how to not kill those application solutions, also for people, for fun, and so on and so on. But in some areas, this is the requirements from doctors, for example, because they are saying, okay, when I will have some data, some information due to application systems, and I will decide about the therapy. So I need, because of my liability, I need some strong information and some rules. And this is the reason. This is the only reason. So I understand that you didn't want to understand what I have said, but I again tried to explain. Yeah, but you know, this is not, I have separated, I have divided many data, many other activities related to fitness, to healthcare and so on, but I have indicated that in the area when the devices will be used by the doctors in the process, so at that situation we need some rules and standards, yes, it was it is the only explanation, yes? So I think that we can agree at the end.
Let's see if you want to make a remark, or?
If we come back to the first question, I think because you already answered the concern, the priority of among this DSM, let's say, agenda, my feeling, and it's probably the point of view of the big operator or traditional, is the priority is definitely infrastructure, to help to build infrastructure, not by giving priority to bulldozer, as you say, but there is a way, let's say. And second, I don't know, second is probably interoperability, which is maybe another word for regulation, I don't know. And the third, I will hesitate between innovation and data protection, personal data protection, I think it is.
I just want to pick up on the third question which the gentleman raised, and I thought it was a very good question about how do you get good regulation in an environment where people feel they need to respond very fast. And I think that's a real challenge, and I'm glad that I do the job I do and not the regulatory job, because I think it's a tough challenge to try to get the balance that we talked about earlier right. And I think, in things like cookies and data retention policies, it's not always been a successful set of outcomes, a lot of work, and it's not clear that consumers have benefited, but these things do stem from legitimate concerns. How is my data used online? Am I well protected? I think what I've seen is where we have a dialogue, and this is why this is so important, and it's so great that the Commission is going to be here, hopefully have a chance to hear from all of us as well as to talk to us, to have a dialogue about what's possible when you combine the new technology with the kinds of things we want to protect. So we have that thoughtful debate about protecting the future from the past and the past from the future. Let me give you a couple of examples. So copyright, we operate YouTube, and there's an awful lot of concern from the content industry about copyright online. So we listened very hard to what they were concerned about and worked together to build something called Content ID, which means you can identify and take down copies of your content, or claim the content and leave it up and choose how it's seen and monetize it and so on. 90% of people who claim their content, and thousands of people do, leave it up online because they now have control. And I think that's a good example of understanding what people are concerned about and then working with technology to bring benefits to both the consumer and the content creator. I think we've made big advances as an industry on online child protection. It's by no means perfect, but we've made big strides by bringing together the concerns with what can technology do to connect people and families better. There's a lot more to do, but I see progress there as well. So I do think that when there's a dialogue, when we genuinely try to get past the understandings and away from responding to today's headlines, we can have really good outcomes. And that's one of the reasons I spend more time, unfortunately, talking to politicians, because I feel that we've got a duty to explain what's possible and to explain the reality of what's happening today. So I welcome that dialogue, and I think that's the best way for us to proceed if we want to protect what's important to us, but grab the opportunities of the future.
We have still, I mean, like some time for other questions. Otherwise, yeah. Questions? Do you want to?
Well, actually, just one more quick word about an earlier question, which was, so what really is needed? One of the bits that was in the telecom single market and that seems not to be in the council text was the whole spectrum management area. Now, I do not think that Brussels needs to be running all of spectrum management. The text that was in the original proposal was probably much too broad. But the one area that I think many people would agree, and also that the industry would generally support, is that in terms of ensuring that spectrum is promptly released to market, especially as we look forward to the 700 megahertz band, that some increased coordinating power and some enforceable powers on the part of the Commission, with rights, let's say, of derogation in legitimate cases. That's probably an area where centralizing more power in Brussels is needed and appropriate.
That's a super interesting subject, and particularly, I mean, like if we want to take a perspective more from a national, markets. I mean, actually, national governments, because how. Do you think that an agreement among member states could be achieved? And is there really a legitimate concern from a perspective of national governments that this would entail a loss of revenue, for example? This is, I think, it's.
Well, the Commission has regularly argued as if they thought that concern on the part of the governments of loss of revenue was the only reason that they opposed this. I think that's actually an affront to the national governments. To me, the much larger issue is that national governments understand the path dependencies and the circumstances in their respective member states much better than Brussels does. And I think that really is much more the core issue. As far as the time to market on the 700 megahertz, I think almost everybody agrees that needless delays should be avoided. The question really is, how would you come up with a sensible compromise that gives the Commission more power? There was, of course, in theory, an understanding about the 800 megahertz spectrum that wasn't actually, enforceable. So, but I think there's a lot of opportunity. Well, since our next speaker has just arrived, let me yield.
All right. Now, so well, I would. Do you want to have like one short close remark? I mean, like you know.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's been a really interesting conversation, and I think I remain of the position that in Europe we need to be optimistic about the future. We've had a good discussion about sort of the balance of trust and rights and embracing what's important to us today, but protecting the future from the past. We have amazing entrepreneurs and innovators in Europe doing amazing things, and we're starting to see unicorns emerging here, as we talked about. And if we can have one rule book that makes it easier for the unicorns to scale faster, that will make a big difference. Secondly, I think we need to be outward looking. The internet economy doubles in the next 5 years. And just pause and think about that. Twice the number of customers for any business in Europe, twice the number of people who can consume European cultures. Really ask the politicians to help support that. And then thirdly, and probably most importantly, being open as a community to the best in the world. So being open to using the tools and to allowing us to embrace the competition that will bring consumers better services and our companies the chance to compete on a global field. So I really welcome that. And thanks for the chance to have this debate.
No, thanks to you.
In addition, last point, I think that the digital single market strategy is like to find a good balance between centralization and decentralization, good balance between demand and supply, and good balance between European level and member states level, because we should avoid fragmentation, but on the other hand we should understand with respect some national interests. And of course the balance is also related to the key words for the future internet world as privacy and security. How to balance security, privacy and freedom, this is the challenge, and I think that we should make it.
Thanks a lot. This has been a super interesting discussion. Thanks to all the panelists. And we'll now have the opportunity to hear it firsthand by the European Commission. Commissioner Oettinger is very welcome to join us now. But before that, please join me to thank the panelists with a big round of applause.
Okay, let's take the second to move. Let me very much welcome Commissioner Günther Oettinger to our panel debate today. Commissioner Oettinger is, of course, responsible for the digital agenda and, of course, our topic of today, the digital union. And he's driving this debate, and I don't think Mr. Oettinger needs a big introduction. He has a very distinguished career in politics, both in Germany as well as at the European level, including in the last commission for energy issues, now for digital issues, both key issues in the European debate. And so we very much look forward to your keynote lecture, to your remarks. We debated already what should be the priorities of the digital single market. So afterwards, I guess the audience will have a chance to ask the questions. If your vision doesn't match fully what was discussed on the panel, there will be lots of opportunities to discuss, but also otherwise. So thank you very much again for accepting to come and speak today, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Mr. Oettinger.
Dear Director Guntram Wolf, dear Mario Marinelli, dear Member of European Parliament, Michel Boni, ladies and gentlemen, may I first congratulate Bruegel, our European think tank, to the 10th anniversary and to the extraordinary program you are absolving and offering as this conference today together with the Foreign Ministry, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Poland. I think it's a good partnership, and your agenda for today, I could read with high-level people, is a real good chance to bring some expectations to us, to me, and to give some first information and outlook from my side to the plenary. We are living in a digital revolution since some years, and it's an ongoing development. Others have a clear strategy. Take the US, take South Korea, more and more take China. And so it's our idea to come to a European strategy, to come to a digital strategy leveraging Europe, our labor markets, our technical competence, our European markets in all member states, coming to a digital union as our vision before end of the decade. The world is turning digital faster than we could have imagined. Digital is already everywhere, yet this is only the beginning, the starting point. Citizens more and more are digital. 3/4 use the internet regularly. Especially for those under 40, the internet has become an integral part of our life. Companies are currently starting the 5th or the 6th wave of digital. From simple websites, many have moved on to using enterprise resource planning for logistics, social media for branding, e-invoices for accounting. However, too few of them are selling online. Also, public administrations are moving online first. 1/4 of EU citizens make requests online. We have heard about the benefits of the digital world for productivity. Digitization has been, is and will be good for our European Union, our economies and our citizens. Yet, it cannot help thinking that it would be much better for Europe if we were able not only to use digital technology, but also to play a bigger role in creating it. Hardware, software, services, products. Not just importing from the US or from Asia, but developing and producing, serving by ourselves. To generate more high-quality jobs and to contribute to shaping the digital world. Today, we reap some, but not enough, of the digital jobs and shape very little of this new internet world. Every sportsman, every footballer in the world wants to play in Europe. That is where the game is. For the same reason, every ICT specialist dreams of going to the US. Silicon Valley or Boston, universities, research institutions, world-class companies as Google, Apple, Microsoft, Cisco, Facebook, Amazon, IBM, Hewlett-Packard, and others are. We should make Europe a place where ICT dreams also come true. To get there, European policy must follow where citizens, companies and administrations have already gone. Otherwise, we will end up with a European Union for the analog world and a return to purely national thinking for the digital world. 21st century technology with 19th century policy. Ladies and gentlemen, Europe needs a digital union. Our European Union from the beginning in the 1950s, it was and is an union of and for peace. A union and a community with own values. A union with more and more one currency. And, no doubt, single markets. We have a functioning single market for goods, for cars, for trucks, for agricultural products, food, for wine and beer, for financial services, but actually we have not a functioning digital single market. We have 28 fragmented silos. Today is a good day. Why? In parallel to your conference, the Council in Luxembourg came to a decision. After 9 months of intensive negotiations inside, 28 ministers came to a decision looking to the General Data Protection Directive. The proposal coming from the Commission, it was in January 2012, developed by my former colleague Viviane Reding, now member of the European Parliament. And so, 3 years later, the Council is ready to come to a trilogue with the Parliament, and my expectation and my hope is that we will have one European-wide General Data Protection Directive before end of the year. No more 28 fragmented rules. Because for the moment, everybody can check in which member state which regulation is existing and where is the level lower than in other member states. Now we have one market, one data protection regulation. And this must be a blueprint. We need more and more European copyright. We have to modernize our audiovisual media services directive. We need a cross-border investment for digital broadband, for digital infrastructure from Portugal to Latvia, from Ireland to Greece. And so the digital union today, we have a good step in the right direction, and it's up to the Parliament to come to a decision together with the Council, which would be a huge progress on the way to our digital union. we need a digital union. With common rules and a common policy, Europe has much better chances to seize the opportunities of digital era. The digital single market is a key element in this, but not just for economic reasons. The EU is not anymore just an economic community. It's a European Union, union of common values and common principles. One of these principles is Europeanization of the rules to be respected by businesses and giving consumers a consistent level of protection. In a truly digital single market, all should be protected by the same privacy rules. Companies should be able to sell online under the same conditions. Copyright should be better harmonized to give companies and citizens legal certainty when accessing copyright protected content across borders. Telecom and media companies should benefit from a consistent framework allowing for economies of scale and ensuring a level playing field. Non-discrimination on the basis of nationality is another fundamental principle and value of our European Union. A digital economy in which, for example, a Polish citizen is refused to buy products on a German website and is instead referred to a Polish website is not compatible with the idea of a Europe which we have been building for the last 50 years. Surely, there are economic arguments why such discrimination is inefficient. And there are areas, for example, for copyright-protected digital content, where it may remain justified. For example, in order to preserve the value of rights in the audio-visual sector. But we should definitively act, as announced in our recently published Digital Single Market Strategy, against the so-called commercial geo-blocking or similar unjustified discriminatory practices. They are not compatible with a citizen's Europe, even if it were impossible to calculate the exact benefits of getting away with such practices. It was Einstein who said not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. And I believe that non-discrimination counts in Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, if we need a digital union for Europe, how should it look like? Of course, there needs to be a true single digital market with no discrimination, no barriers, and so many fragmented rules. But for it to create all the benefits which we expect, we need to help our industries to be at the forefront of developing and exploiting ICT. Sustainable manufacturing, usine du futur, automation, Industry 4.0, name it as you wish, must be our common European priority so that our industries can serve the markets of the future. Last decades, it was just the ICT sector. Now, the digital sector is coming to the real economy. It's changing all sectors of our industries. Automotive sector, manufacturing, chemical industries, banking industries, insurance industries. And therefore we need a smart European strategy, not against the US, not against South Korea, but to be competitive in a global dimension for next decades. We also, dear colleagues, need digital skills. Many more than we have so far. Digital skills for everyday life, for a normal job and for ICT specialists. Indeed, today many people are afraid that their job can be digitized away. Who can compete with an iPad? This is no idle fear. Many jobs as we know them today will disappear. Some famous studies puts the number of current jobs which could be replaced by computers at around 50%. But this is nothing new. Digitalization or not digitalization, nothing is as constant as change, said Heraclit, and he certainly did not have the digital world in mind. Digital will destroy some jobs. There's no question about it. So did the steam engine, and so did electricity. The question is how fast we can adapt to the new technology to create new jobs. To be able to adapt and to use the new technologies, we need to upgrade Europe's overall level of digital skills. True, this is already happening. Schools are introducing more ICT in their curricula. Companies offer more vocational ICT training. Even the EU has already launched 2 initiatives to promote digital education, the Grand Coalition for Digital Jobs, and the Opening Up Education Initiative. But does anyone really believe we are moving fast enough? 10 years ago, even IT specialists thought a driverless car to be impossible in the near future. And now automated driving is just a starting point. Today, Mercedes and others have already been sending driverless cars and lorries in rush hour traffic on our roads for some time. Large-scale upskilling to enable new digital solutions which are improving our lives are not a long-term necessity, it's an urgency. Companies need digital competent workers and customers. Public administrations switching to digital need digitally competent citizens. It's only when everybody can handle the digital invoice that the paper-based invoice can be abolished. Until then, Gutenberg's printing press of 1522 will peacefully coexist with the latest cloud app. And certainly beyond, people will still want to touch and smell the real paper, but better for leisure than for bureaucratic processes. So, we need to accelerate the upgrading of digital skills. But there is only so much policy can do. In the end, citizens, you and me, will rapidly learn digital only if they want to do. Ladies and gentlemen, what we really need to do is to make ICT fashionable in Europe for industries and for people. That is a tall order. But if we manage to make Europe a place where ICT dreams do come true, people will start dreaming. Thank you all for your input and for your attention.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I think we have a little bit of time for a few questions, and we've discussed many of the issues you raised in your talk: Industry 4.0, digitalization, fear of job losses, but of course also business opportunities, copyrights, and all these issues. We have discussed these in the panels before, so let me open the floor and perhaps get 3 questions from the floor, 3 or 4 questions from the floor, so that we can get a chance with the Commissioner here answering some of these questions. So who would like to kind of ask the first icebreaker question, please? Yes. Should get a microphone.
Commissioner Oettinger, I think, Commissioner, you have changed the level of discussion, and precisely what we need in Europe. And I would ask you to say something more about Industry 4.0, because I think we should start from there. The revolution in the production, manufacturing, and the way Europe can transform its own economy and the system and compete with other countries outside Europe, because I think this is one very important part, essence of your understanding and the vision that you have, because it's very important. Before I was saying our friend here that now finally we have a vision. Okay, it's not perfect, but we have a vision, and we can start to work from the vision.
Okay, let me collect two more questions. Do you have? You have, okay. So who would like, please?
Commissioner, my name is Matt Britton. I work for a company called Google, and I'm proud to be a European internet evangelist. And I wanted to ask you what more you think all of us can do to ensure that the next great internet businesses come from Europe. And you mentioned skills, and I think I could agree with everything you said in your speech. But how do you think industry can play a role in this? I'd love you to clarify some of the remarks you've made about the way to achieve competitive businesses from within Europe that can truly be global. Thank you.
Okay, there's a third question. Yeah, please. Do you have someone with a microphone?
Hi, my name is Magdalena Piech. I work in the Polish Confederation, Leviathan, that's the organization of business. And I have a question which relates to what has been said, that today digital is not only ITC, it's everywhere. And very often once we regulate domains which are not connected directly with the e-commerce, telecommunications sector, so on and so forth, we in a way indirectly regulate the digital market as well. And I wanted to ask about the Commission idea of how to verify, to kind of make an impact assessment of other regulations which do not relate directly to e-commerce, but influence this area significantly. And more precisely, I mean, I have a data protection regulation in mind, which was mentioned by the Commissioner. This is a very important piece of legislation which is about to be finished, and I think that it should be considered from this point of how it will impact the digital economy, SMEs, and which solutions should be actually implemented or which should be limited. Thank you.
So perhaps we have already three rich questions, but if you agree, we get one more. If there's one more burning question, okay. So then,
we had in the past, namely a relation between business and consumers, B2C. And now it's more and more B2B, machine to machine, fabric to fabric. And digital is not new, but being connected with digital services is the new dimension. And who is the owner of data? Who has data? Who is using data? Having data, using data means to win the competition. The owner of the data is powerful. And so we need a creative vision, because data in our EU look to the automotive sector, look to mobility, look to manufacturing, look to buildings, housing. There are any second a lot of data, but not activated, not stored, not used, not implemented into digital services for the moment. And the Internet of Things, IoT, or Catapult, or Industry 4.0, what does it mean? It does mean that the ICT sector, the digital services, are coming to all sectors of of the real economy. And we have a clear analysis. The automotive sector is the first one. To produce cars, to connect cars, to come to automated driving, to come to better services, is the first important sector which will be digitalized. And the question is, who is in the center of this value chain? Is it a software house? Is it a platform? Is in 5 or 10 years Google or Apple producing cars? Or is it ongoing Fiat, Renault, Mercedes and BMW? And so it's a key question. And what we need is a smart strategy, not against US. Google is accepted, appreciated. What they are doing is a perfect service. They are the market leader looking to search machines, looking to platforms. But they have to accept our rules, if there are European rules. If not, not. And data protection rules have to be accepted from everybody, inside and outside our EU. Who is serving in our EU? Who is delivering products for our EU? And so here our single market, here our data protection directive. These are two parts of one coin, which has a real instrumental function. And the second but, I think we should have an ambition. Platforms of the next generation could be Europeans as well. Not just Europeans, but the Americans and the Japanese and the Koreans are producing cars. We are importing these cars and we are exporting European cars. In a global market, we need more competitiveness. So with our R&D programs, with our Horizon 2020, we are supporting and we are moderating and co-financing new projects, namely with SMEs and startups, for to come to European platforms of the next generation, being competitive to others coming from Asia or from the US. And my last idea, or my second last idea, cloud computing should be in service made in Europe as well, more and more. And last point, we have new competitors. Take TV broadcasters or take the telecom companies as Orange, as Deutsche Telekom, as Telefonica, as British Telecom, as Vodafone and others are. Here the telecom sector and now new competitors. Here the audiovisual sector, TV broadcasters, and now Netflix or YouTube or Amazon services which you can use downloading films in a competition to BBC, to ZDF, to public and private broadcasters all over Europe. And so the main question is, we are analyzing the market and the market development. Do we just modernize our existing directives, or which picture, how broad the picture has to be for to come to a level playing field? Because for the moment, our audiovisual media services directive is just relevant for TV broadcasters and not for Netflix. And our telecoms are investing in broadband and Google is using it, not investing. So how to come back to a fair competition, to come to a level playing field with European guidelines, with regulation, or with non-regulation related to existing companies, is our ambition, and we will come with an analysis maybe beginning next year. And then we have to develop a modernized rules. Guaranteeing the level playing field is not an illusion, but is a pragmatic solution we have to realize. Thank you all.
So thank you very much, Commissioner. I think it is time to conclude our discussion today. We have discussed many different issues, but all related to digital union. I think all issues that will affect the way we consume, but also the way we produce. And I think the Commissioner and others have very much emphasized that we have the both sides. We have the consumer side and the producer side that matter here really. We have the demand and the supply side. I think it's a very important lesson we took away. We have the question of how this will impact our existing industry, how it will impact new industries. We have big questions about jobs, about the future essentially of employment. But also, of course, there's questions how much regulation we need in this industry. And I was quite struck being in Poland, I have to say, the tone on regulation is very different from the tone on you get in Brussels, where certainly the instinct is much more towards regulation than it is in Poland. So I thought that was a very interesting new emphasis that we heard here, that perhaps we need not quite as much regulation as we thought we do. So I think without much further ado, let me thank all of you, all the speakers, the Commissioner, the Minister, but also all the participants who have very actively today shaped the debate. Also, thank you for this great conference, and please stay trusty to Bruegel and come back to our website. We are online for quite some time, and we will get a new website actually in some time. So please come back to follow our contributions to these debates. And thank you again, Commissioner, and to all of you. Thank you.
When we see in Brussels.
I don't know if you just